What's going on, everybody? I'm Smiley's Garden, and we're here for the Organics Takeover. And this month, I get the opportunity to speak with Chandler from Jet House Gardens and Wormies of Grand Rapids. So, Chandler, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself a minute. I'm going to bring up chat 1 second here while you do. Can you
Yeah,
tell
for sure.
what you guys do and who you are or whatever?
My name's Chandler. I've been working for Wormies for 2.5 years now, and we take food scraps and manure and wood chips and a bunch of really cool inputs that are traditionally viewed as like at the end of their life or like waste, and we recycle or upcycle them, mix them all together, and we create a really, really awesome compost. And then we feed that to worms, and the whole entire soil food web, and everything just breaks down, and we have some really cool vermicompost that we make out of that. But yeah, I've been doing that for like 2.5 years, and then using the castings that we make, the soil that I make, and growing some really good ganja, and growing some really good vegetables and everything.
Oh, yeah, that's what's up.
Cannabis, yeah, for sure.
I really, man, I'm a fan. I've been using the Wormies for probably well over a year now in my garden.
Awesome, man.
And yeah, man, it's a real big difference. So I'm excited to have the chance to really kind of talk with you about the process too, because I knew you guys were collecting food scraps and whatnot from different places. So that was kind of what caught my attention. Is it's cool because it's keeping some of this stuff out of the landfills, but I didn't realize all the other steps you guys did as far as like bringing in wood chip as well, and you
Yeah.
posting it before. But
So that's what kind of makes us different than other vermicomposting companies and like other worm castings that you get. They just feed those worms like shredded up newspaper and peat moss and shit like that, and they end up with like a really homogeneous product, but there's no beneficial life to it. Like worm castings should be like an inoculation of microbes. They shouldn't just be a physical placement or like a placeholder in your soil, you know. And so like using the wood or the food scraps, we have such a wide variety of nutrients in all that food. And then the wood chips are a great carbon source, really long-term food source for the fungi. And so like the whole entire composting process is about a year. And so we call it wormies. We give a lot of the credit to the worms, but like there's so much more at play. The fungi are a huge part of that, you know.
no, and I see the pictures on the website or on Instagram. I mean, of that you're posting up of some of the mushrooms even growing out of the compost piles and whatnot too. And you said it
Yeah.
takes about a year process, is what? Um,
Yeah, so we'll take in the food scraps in the beginning and kind of mix everything, the wood chips, the manure. It's like the browns and greens. I don't know if you're familiar with composting very much, but like basically you want like around 60% brown carbon-rich material and 40% nitrogen green material. And so like your food scraps, for instance, that's going to be like mainly the green nitrogen-rich. There's a lot of moisture content in there, and everything's going to break down and heat up, but also so like this is the main problem with people that want to compost at home. You know, that they just want to compost their food scraps, and so they toss all their food scraps in a bucket, and there's not enough of the brown carbon-rich material to like even it out, and it all just turns into like a sloppy mess, you know, and can attract flies and whatever. And so like that's the common problem that we get. People want to be conscious about their waste and be responsible for their food scraps, and they want to compost, but you really need to accumulate some of that the brown biomass as well. So like you can do that with like we use the wood chips, but on like a home basis you can do like your cardboard, so like your toilet paper and paper towel tubes, any shredded paper that doesn't have like the glossy coating on it. You can, if you have access to any wood chips, or save up your leaves every fall. So like, this is crazy, man. People think that the trees are like making a mistake or something, and oh, they drop their leaves again. Gotta rake them all up and ship them off my property. Like that shit is so stupid. Like the trees are trying to feed themselves. You know, they're trying to make more soil, and that's what like everything in nature is trying to do is trying to make more soil, and it's
So,
awesome, man.
so if I had, say I made a salad at home and I got, you know, tomato ends and some lettuce ends and all that, does all that like fruits and vegetable kind of stuff fall under that green that you were talking, like the nitrogen side? Is that
Yeah, exactly. When it's still full of the life like that. And it's an oversimplification. There's a lot more than carbon and nitrogen, obviously, but yeah, those are going to fall into like the green category.
right?
And so you need to balance that out with some like the brown, drier stuff, you know, carbon rich.
Yeah, no doubt. And then, so you guys mix that, you said 60 brown and 40 of the green, and then put it in
Yeah.
the pile, and
So I get on tangents all the time. You might need to remind me what I was talking about in the first place. But so yeah, we mix all that shit up and then we put it through like a thermophilic hot composting. And so like that's your traditional like big piles of compost that you see someone flipping with a tractor, or, like traditionally with a pitchfork. And so like the idea with flipping it all the time is you really need oxygen as like a huge part of all of this. And so we're dealing with aerobic microbes, or what we're really trying to focus on is these microbes that really need oxygen to survive. And so you have this pile that's breaking down, and all these microbes are eating all this organic matter. And if there's not enough oxygen in there, they'll consume their oxygen, and the pile will turn and go anaerobic. And so a different set of microbes will come in, and that's like your putridification microbes. And so like that's how you get stuff that smells putrid. And if you ever like stepped into like the mucky riverbank or something and like lost your shoe down there and pulled out your foot and it's just got this rank smell, like that's anaerobic microbes at work there. And, they're thriving without the oxygen down there. And so we're trying to prevent that in our compost. We don't want that nasty smell, and we don't want those nasty microbes that could harm our plants. A lot of those anaerobes are creating like alcohols, and so if you have a huge pile of compost like we do, and things get anaerobic in the middle, they're producing these volatile compounds like alcohols and stuff. And when you open up that bin and things are super hot and it mixes with that alcohol, that's how like you get a fire. And so I don't know. There's some dangers to thermophilic composting, but like really, if you know the basics of it, and
yeah, no, that's interesting. You mentioned that the fire is a hazard, actually, and in a
absolutely,
reality sense, the pile can literally get hot enough to combust and ignite.
yeah. All this is like really an art form, kind of like monitoring and keeping track of these environmental factors that most of us aren't even conscious about, you know. And so to prevent the anaerobic microbes from happening, I mean, we used to turn the piles with pitchforks, but we've expanded past that, and now we actively aerate our piles. So we have these actively aerated bays, and so we have like 6 cubic feet or 6 cubic yards of compost in these hex bins, and underneath them we have PVC pipes going the whole entire distance of the bin. And so like every half hour or so, it'll turn on and blast oxygen all the way through that pile for like 30 seconds. And in the wintertime, we keep them covered with tarps and stuff, and you'll just see all the steam building up and like leaking out of the tarp. It's a cool visualization for sure. But that has totally saved our backs and so much time and effort, you know. So like we're always trying to automate where we can, but like you got to be there monitoring it and checking up on it and listening to the compost, hearing what it's telling you, you know. And that's the same in the garden, you know. Automation's great, but you always got to be there listening to the plants and being in tune.
I like that we talk about it too, like like listening to the compost, you know, kind of almost the way you'd read a plant, you know. It's interesting.
Totally. Yeah. oxygen is a huge part of it, but also the moisture content is absolutely vital. You got to make sure that there's enough moisture through all stages of this. And so after the thermophilic composting, we take that hot compost and we lay it out into these thin rows, and so it all cools down, and then from there we'll introduce the worms from our old piles. So when we're sifting our finished compost, we put them through these big trommels, and what comes out at the end is just a bunch of chunky wood chips that are totally coated in all the castings, and then all the worms and the worm cocoons and a bunch of the macro arthropods or whatnot. The bigger insects are left in that finished sifting. And so we take that stuff and we kind of use that as like a mother culture, and we use that to inoculate these new piles, the thermophilic piles. And so we take the thermophilic compost and we mix it in with bokashi compost and with these mushroom blocks, and just get as much biodiversity as possible rocking, and then just let it sit there. And so after a while it'll cool down, and we'll introduce cover crop seeds. And I don't know, I got so many things that I could talk about right now just off of that, but
love it, man. I actually I'm kind of amazed at the steps, really. I mean, I've never heard of the cover crop seed being added in
yeah, so that's another thing that is really unique to Wormies, you know, is we're focused on the soil food web. We're not just focused on quick making earthworm castings, you know. And so those cover crops, the list of benefits is seriously just like endless. It's insane.
I mean, a lot of people think of them as like nitrogen fixing, but I know I'm kind of leaning towards the other side of that, which I think is kind of what you're getting at, is the biological side, where like each plant is going to propagate its own type of biology to that plant. So if you have a diverse amount of plants growing, you're going to get a wider, diverse species.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's something that we'll do in the future, is kind of cater the cover crops to what kind of compost we want. And so like if you want compost for trees, then obviously you want something that's really fungal dominant. And so we'd obviously stay away from brassicas and look for more like perennial like grasses and stuff like that we can plant as cover crops that will team with the fungi more and cater to a more fungal dominant soil. And then for the opposite, like if you do want compost for brassicas and these quick finishing vegetables, then we'd plant brassicas in there. And so the idea with that is like these brassicas, turnips, radishes, shit, there's the whole list, but of course I'm not gonna remember them right now. But they're pumping down exudates into the soil that will actually like inhibit fungal connections. And so all of these plants are catering the soil to what they need. And so these brassicas will secrete these exudates that cater the soil to a more bacterial dominant soil. So it blocks the ability to team with these fungi. And so if you have plants that really want these mycorrhizal connections in there, if you have a bunch of brassicas there, that might alter that. And so yeah. But anyways, the cover crops in the compost, we just have a good amount of biodiversity in there, and they're pumping down these exudates, and they're stimulating microbial activity. And so up above the soil, we have these huge leaves. We use squash a lot and pumpkins. We've been growing those in our piles for a couple of years now. And so they have these huge leaves that act as like a physical cover crop, you know. And so a lot of this that I'm talking about in the compost is the same reasons that we want it in our soil. But so one, like a physical cover to protect our soil, or a compost from the elements. These microbes don't like to be blasted with the sun or with the wind, you know. They like to stay moist, and a lot of them prefer it in the dark. And so this cover crop protects it from the physical elements up top. But underneath the soil, you have these complex root systems that are breaking through all this stuff, preventing compaction, which is easy to happen, or which happens easily in composting. You get a bunch of heavy, wet material there, and it'll become compact over time. And so these roots physically prevent the compaction. They promote aeration. They promote like water infiltration. And so if you don't have cover crops, and this is what we see in conventional soils, where there's just bare ground, the water hits it and it runs off the top. It doesn't infiltrate down because that top layer has dried out and become hydrophobic. And so all these cover crops with all these roots that are burying down in there, they give like the water channels to infiltrate down into the piles, into the soil. And then if things were to get too moist down there, the roots would wick it back up and store it in the plants. And so it's a really great system to get water retention and nice consistency in our piles. But
so you take it from thermal and then you're doing the cover crop. Is that, and the worms are in there? You said you introduced those after you cooled it, right? And then
yeah, so thermophilic, and so we do that because we're taking in food scraps and manure and stuff, and there's just, we try to do as much quality control as possible, but we're taken from a lot of different sources, and so there is risk of pathogens, and so that is why we choose the thermophilic composting. And so it'll kill off any like seeds that are in all that produce, because if we didn't do that, every single tomato, apple, like everything that's in there is going to sprout those seeds, and you know, it'd be a lot of cover crops, but it'd be out of hand, you know. And so you put it through the hot composting, and it'll get up to like 150 degrees, and it'll stay there for about 2 weeks, and then it'll drop down. And once it drops down below like 120, that's when we take it and put it into that thin row and create like the worm rows. And then one of the downsides of this thermophilic composting is you lose a lot of the nutrients that were in there. And once you get over 130 degrees, you start losing a lot of your biodiversity. And so pros and cons to that thermophilic, you got to kill some of the good guys to make sure that all the bad guys are gone, you know. And so you take that kind of pasteurized substrate and you feed it to the worms. And so we do a couple things to really add some biodiversity after that step. And so one of those things is adding the bokashi compost. And so I'm Beer City Bokashi as well. I make Bokashi brand, which is a fermented inoculant. It's basically just microbes on command, and you can put that in your soil or your compost, or you can do this entirely different method of composting, this anaerobic composting. So you put all your food scraps in this 5-gallon bucket, and you do like a layer of this fermented grain, this bokashi grain, layer of food scraps, layer of grain, layer of food scraps. And after a couple weeks, or however much you're eating, whatever, your bucket gets full. And so once your bucket's full, you leave it sealed. It's got a nice seal on the top, and you let it ferment anaerobically, so without oxygen, for like 2 weeks. And so after 2 weeks, you open it up, and all your food scraps have become fermented. And so instead of like decreasing in size and losing some of the nutrients, like what happens in thermophilic composting, everything is retained in that bucket, and it's actually fermented, and those nutrients become bioavailable. And so you get the benefit of not losing any nutrients to the air or to the ground, but also you get all those nutrients fermented. The biology makes it bioavailable, and then you could use that as like an inoculant because it's totally full of the lactobacillus microbes that fermented everything. And so, sorry, man, I get going, but
No, that's awesome. And I just want to ask a quick question before we go. You said about the Bokashi. You said that was Beer City Bokashi, because I want to give them a shout out too. They're local here too in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, for sure.
I can.
So, Beer City Bokashi. It's the company that I've been working on under the guys at Wormies. But we take spent beer grain because we're in Grand Rapids, Beer City, and there's a surplus of spent beer grain, and we take that and just use it as a carbon source basically. And so we're doing beer grain, but also we're doing like spent mushroom blocks from Michael File's garden. I get like these mushroom blocks that have already fruited mushrooms, and then I like grind them up and pretty much just return them to sawdust. And so both the beer grain and the sawdust mushroom blocks are just these carbon sources that I take and dry them out and then inoculate them with a consortia of microbes known as EM. It's called effective microorganisms. And so that EM is fucking a really cool blend of microbes, and they work synergistically together, which is what makes it a little bit better than just like lab by itself. A lot of natural farmers are used to using lactobacillus and culturing their own lab, which is absolutely great. But this has the lactobacillus as well as the purple non-sulfur bacteria. And so those are these photosynthetic bacteria that get their energy from the sunlight, and they work with these lactobacillus and the yeast that are in there, and they do some really cool shit. So like the yeast are in there. No, I'm not even gonna.
Well, I'm wondering how now you're using those spent blocks too. Is that kind of a fungal inoculant in that as well, or is that kind
Absolutely.
of
Yeah, so that's something that I don't know if anybody else is doing, honestly, using the blocks that have already been inoculated with the fungi and then inoculating it with this beneficial bacteria and yeast. And then, so yeah, after I inoculate it, I ferment it. And so I put it in a big old bin and I take all the oxygen and I let it ferment for like 2 weeks anaerobically. And so after that, you open it up and it's got this nice, sweet, fermented brewery smell, like or sour rather. And you take that and you dry it, and once it's dry, it has a shelf life. It's shelf stable for like 2 years, and it's just microbes on command. And you could sprinkle that shit on your soil or in your compost pile, or you can do this bokashi composting that I was talking about. And it's just a microbial inoculant. And so you sprinkle that on your soil, and the bacteria and the yeast, they start nutrient cycling. They start breaking down the organic and matter that's in the soil, and they start producing secondary metabolites, a bunch of organic acids and amino acids, and all these really cool enzymes that get your soil food web rocking. And so after they do that, the bacteria and the yeast, they're the bottom of the food chain, and so they act as a food source for these larger members of the soil food web to come in, and they eat them, and they shred them apart, and the whole entire nutrient cycling and soil food web happens. But it's some really cool shit.
So back to the compost pile. So you're taking that anaerobic, like you said, the bottom of the food chain, and basically adding that into the compost pile that you're working on.
Yeah, and so that's what's really cool about teaming with so like the bokashi microbes, they're known as facultative anaerobes. And so they're anaerobic microbes that can also do really well in oxygen rich environments. And so when we employ those in our soils and our composts, they're doing their thing. They're part of a rich soil food web in aerobic conditions, so with oxygen, but they're just kind of like a backup there if the conditions were to change and things were to go anaerobic. Now you have something in your arsenal that is capable of dealing like in those conditions, you know. And so if you're teamed with these facultative anaerobes, if you have the bokashi in your soil, if things were to go anaerobic, you have something there to fight off some of those bad guys.
Yeah, no, I dig
So,
that. And I've run the Earth box. You've probably heard of those before. The
yeah, for sure.
Earth boxes do the bokashi on the top, and then the EM is the traditional way I heard about it being ran. I guess guys differ from that in a lot of ways, but no, that's interesting, man. Yeah, because I have through experience with that, I have seen that too, where I've kind of deviated away from trying to use like the bokashi on the top or just different experimenting and seeing how that system can actually crash, and it almost needs that balance constantly there to try to keep it from going to a real super anaerobic bad situation. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, right on.
yeah. So at what point is the pile considered finished then? So how long do you grow the cover crops into the?
Yeah, so when the cover crops go in, we're about like 3 months into the whole entire thing, and then they'll sit there for like 6 months. We'll let them do their thing, and uh, we're getting into like collecting the seed now from the cover crops, and so we're starting to sell like organic cover crop seeds that were grown in our compost and everything like that. But um, yeah, so it just sits there until it's really ready, and so you can tell that by if you were to reach your hand in there at any spot, it's going to look all nice and dark and rich. You're not going to see any recognizable organic matter or anything like that. Like you'll see some wood chips and some like pieces of eggshell, but you're not going to see an apple core still or anything like that. Like everything is totally broken down. And then a good indicator is like when the worms actually start to move away from that spot. It's and onto like the next rich area of the row. That's a good indicator that everything has been kind of processed and they're onto the next spot. And so, but they're never going to totally like get out of there. So whenever we're sifting, there's a ton of worms in there. And like I
So I
said,
was just gonna ask, man, like, how do you consider the herd as moved? Because like anytime I've dealt with them, there seem to be just everywhere through it, no matter what. Like,
honestly, I mean, yeah, they're always going to be there for sure. But you'll notice like, okay,
there's a ton more
the
over
other
here.
day there was like a million, it seemed like, and now there's only like 100 or whatever, you know. And so like and a lot of times they'll still be there, but they'll go down all the way to the bottom of the pile, and a lot of it's temperature too. So like on hot days, you'll see that there's like no worms in there, and so that's what's really cool about having our rows like right on the ground instead of in any like artificial lifted up container or anything like that. You know, is it gives them that safety net of if things get too hot or whatever, they can go down onto that very bottom or even into the native soil underneath. But they're always coming back. And then another benefit of that is so like we mainly use red wigglers. Those are like really popular composting worms. They reproduce super fast. They eat a lot of organic matter, but they generally stay on like the top foot or so of soil and of compost piles. And so when we have these worm rows right on the ground, we allow the native worms, the night crawlers and everything, access to these piles. And so like you look at our castings and you could see like grits of sand in there, and you're like, well, we've never added sand. Where did that come from? And it's like these night crawlers that were down 15 feet, they're mining all that stuff and they're bringing it up to the top and they're exchanging and they're taking some of our castings and they're bringing it back down there and making the soil more rich, and like everything is just so natural. And you don't get that in these other composting companies where they have like worms in these tiny bins and they're just feeding it peat moss and shit. Like this, I think we really got something good going on.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, man. I didn't really realize because that was actually a question I was gonna ask is if you put down a barrier, because I've seen the pictures to where the row I know their rows are kind of on the ground or whatever, but I didn't realize they
Yeah.
go. So there's probably a lot more than just earthworms. I mean, we're talking any of the microbe
No doubt, man.
If any of the
So much
arthropods,
more
any
to
of
learn.
that stuff. Yeah, that's cool, man. So that
Mhm.
there's a lot going on and a lot more to it than I realized actually myself, and I've used it. So I just noticed that I mean, it works. You know what I mean? It's one of them things where it's like you garden enough, and I've used enough different ones before, and it was like wow, a difference when I put it down. So you know, I'm actually have the opportunity of learning all this just along with Chad too. So it's
Hell
cool.
yeah.
I'm excited about it because I'm even more geeked about what you're doing now. So
Hmm.
to be honest, so that's
And
cool.
then, yeah, what makes it so cool is like you got that right after we sifted it, and like it's fresh and it's living and breathing, and like, and that's why we don't ship these microbes across the country. You know, it's like we'd really love to. We'd make a lot of money off of it for sure, but selling biology from Michigan to Florida, like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It could be one like dangerous, sending biology that maybe doesn't have any natural uh, like competitors down there. Like so, like that's what's so cool about learning about the soil food web and everything is like everything is a series of checks and balances, and having this biodiversity in mind is just uh, a way to prevent anything from taking off and having like a pest takeover and stuff like that. But so if you sell this compost across the country, there's a risk of that. I'm not saying that there's anything bad in our compost, but
No, it's
uh,
just different. It's a different environment. One could be there that's
for sure,
natural or whatever. It's just.
exactly.
But the other
Um,
side of that coin too is how I mean, how useful is Michigan biology going to work in Florida? You
no,
know.
absolutely, for sure. And so like this is even true about like brewing a compost tea. You know, like you really want to work with the microbes in the environment that they're going to be employed in. So like if you're brewing a compost tea outside and it's 50 degrees ambient temperature, and like then you take it into your grow room and it's 80 degrees and like the lights are popping, you know, you're basically taking like humans from Antarctica and transporting them to like the Sahara, and like they're gonna be like, what the fuck, you know? And so like
With the igloo out of the sand at work.
yeah. So so brewing a compost tea, like you want to brew it in the environment that you're gonna work in. And so like using compost that was made in Michigan, you're going to want to use that in Michigan or a really similar climate. Use some of these indigenous microbes that are proven to live through the winters and everything like that. And so I think there's absolutely enough of a market for us here in Michigan and around that there's no need for us to really ship out of state um, once people realize that they got something good here in Michigan. But then there's like most compost that you buy has been bagged up in a plastic bag and sitting on the shelf for God knows how long and shipped in from out of state. And like, it just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense once you learn about indigenous microbes and like using the microorganisms that are proven to work in your state or in your area, you know, in your microclimate.
Yeah, the real power behind it. You know, that was on. That's one thing that really attracted me to it too. Is the local. It's a local thing to me, so I can get it. Like you said, it's fresh. You know, and every time I've opened a bag, it's like, yeah, I feel like it just got pulled right out of the dang pile. You know, every time. So, I mean, that was a big draw for me. But even in like you just mentioned there too, there's no plastic bag. It's all in a breathable bag, and everything's you know happens in a way that it's not going to diminish that biology that's built up in there. So
It's pretty crazy. Whenever we have a farmer's market, which is like every Saturday, we go to the Fulton Street Farmer's Market. I'll have a bunch of bags of castings in my car, and I always got to leave my windows open a crack because if I don't, like, it's so condensated in there, like they're living, breathing microbes, and like it's pretty crazy. Like a good visual representation of like the respiration at play, you know. It, it's pretty trippy,
yeah, no shit, man. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's dope.
for
So
real.
you go to the market every Saturday, or every
Yeah, we try to. Sometimes, I mean, we're super busy, you know. Sometimes there's something else. Um, But yeah, we try to be at the farmer's market.
See, and I use it in the cannabis realm, but yeah, I would imagine like market gardeners would probably dig it too, you know, like for
Yeah, they're starting to, and so like that's the thing with Wormies is like we have this pickup service. We offer a compost pickup, and so we have all these customers around Grand Rapids that know us. They know that their food scraps are going to create this really good compost, and then they want to use that. But like the majority of our sales are definitely cannabis growers for sure. But this past year or so, a lot of these traditional Wormies customers, the pickup customers, have been doing their own gardens, and we started offering like a bed, a garden mix, a vegetable soil mix, and so we've noticed a lot more non-cannabis customers for sure.
okay. That's cool, man.
When COVID hit, everybody was looking for something to do, and like a lot of people started their own gardens. A lot of people realized that they weren't the least bit sufficient or couldn't take care of themselves or anything like that. But like we ended up setting up a lot of people with their gardens, and so it was pretty great to keep us afloat during COVID and everything for sure.
That's a great idea too, because like you say, a lot of people maybe didn't know how to do it or whatever and wanted it. So that's nice.
Totally.
I like that. So now onto the soil mix. I mean, you mentioned that. You guys, do you make a cannabis specific mix too? Is that?
Yeah, totally. So we have like two mixes that we consider cannabis mixes. The Lux mix, which is everything all in one. You could really get away with like a water only, even though I don't like that. Like I don't know, water only is cool. If you're lazy, if you're disabled, you got something else. But like if you're growing indoors, it's unsustainable, just period, And so like you really got to be maxing out your yield indoors. And so like, what can you do to really boost these plants along and kind of justify the carbon footprint that you're using, like being tapped into the electrical grid? And so like, if you're only giving your plants water only, like it's cool, you're gonna get some good ganja, but I think trying to max out your yield in the most organic, natural ways is the way to go. Like still just like feeding your soil everything and letting that decide what the plant needs. Like the plant and the soil are constantly in communication, figuring out what they need. But I'm talking about things like foliar spraying. And so like whenever you foliar feed your plants, you can save a ton of metabolic energy. And so like they don't need to be taking up those nutrients through their roots. And so you can directly feed them by spraying their leaves and feeding them through their stomata. And so when you do that with things like amino acids, then the plant doesn't need to biosynthesize those amino acids. And so like the plant's going to need amino acids regardless. And so if you're not applying it, then it's going to create its own amino acids through photosynthesis. But like if you were to take some worm castings, create a really rich compost tea, or fish amino acids, or like some fish hydrolysate or soybean hydrolysate, any of these products that are really rich in amino acids, and apply that, then the plant no longer needs to make it for itself. And so you've saved it a ton of energy, and now it can like focus that energy on doing the things that you want it to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting nitrogen source the aminos can be. And, it's a cool topic for sure. That foliar. So the Lux mix, I just want to say that is actually the mix that I got for. I put together 2 earth boxes for Eagle Garden, the host, and
Nice. Yeah.
he was running Coco and did a side-by-side with him, and he was just adding the biology and some of the top dressing, some of the worm castings from you guys too. But yeah, it rocked out, man. It was really pretty awesome to see. So
Fuck yeah.
it definitely was on point. I didn't. You have another one that you considered?
Yeah. Thank you for keeping me on track, man. So yeah, you got the Luxe, and then there's the Essential. And so the Essential's a bit of a cheaper mix, but a lot of our long-term customers, some really good growers that have some experience, and they are using like the teas and extracts along the way. Um, they have absolutely no problem using that Essential mix and just kind of coaching their plants along the way. But so yeah, the Luxe and the Essential mix are both really nice, heavily amended, but nice, lightweight, heavily aerated mixes. And so like that's what you really got to look for in a cannabis mix is it's got so much organic matter in there and so much microbial activity that you really got to have enough aeration to allow those microbes to breathe. And so same thing that we're talking about in the compost pile. If they're eating all that organic matter and breathing all that oxygen, they're going to consume it. And so you got to have physical soil structure that allows gas exchange. And so a lot of people don't think about this, but like good soil is like 50% physical property and physical, or 50% like gas and air exchange. And so pretty fucking wild, right? But like all the little pore spaces in between these soil aggregates, they're holding gas, they're holding different gases. And so when you do a heavy watering, you kind of flush out that stale oxygen and you give this fresh H2O and kind of replenishes all that stuff.
So what are you using for the aeration in there?
Yeah, thank you. So traditionally, a lot of soil companies will use perlite. And if you've ever used the soil with perlite, you'll notice that perlite isn't very stable in the soil structure and it'll float up to the top. And you get these mats of white, it looks like styrofoam, and it's terrible. Like if you're familiar with it, you know that it's nice and coarse and gritty. And if you can imagine yourself being a worm, what it would be like to come up to the top and try to eat some organic matter and have to deal with that bullshit. Like it's like rolling around in some sandpaper for us. Like if we were naked rolling around in sandpaper, like not good at all. And so like the worms hate the perlite. A lot of these soil organisms hate the perlite, but also the perlite will become compact on top and create compaction layers. And so same thing that happens in soil without cover crops. If you have the perlite layer on top, you're going to get runoff. And so it's going to create these compaction layers and these runoff channels. And so instead of water infiltrating on the top, you water and it all just runs off the side of your pot. And stuff that we really don't want. And so we don't use perlite, we use vermiculite and lava rocks and rice hulls and biochar. And we're always looking for different and more sustainable sources of aeration, but like that long-term aeration is so vital, because when we're talking about like no-till and like these, like reusing your soil over and over, eventually these beds just become like castings, you know, they're basically just worm bins. And so they turn all that peat and everything into worm castings. And so if you don't have enough long-term aeration in there, things will become compact and could go anaerobic and a bunch of stuff that you're not looking for.
That was going to be one of my questions, was how the long-term reuse of it, because that was exactly the issue I ran into with making my soil originally. So 2 years ago, I've been mixing soil with basically a modified Coots mix or Cornell mix, whatever. But they, but I used the rice hulls and they disappeared, and I wound up with some weird issues going on with the plant. And then it dawned on me one day, no shit, this thing's a freaking hockey puck down on the bottom here. So it basically was too. But like you say, it was all castings, you know, it just basically turned into like a weird, I don't know, when I dug through it later, it was just weird.
For sure. And so like, yeah, rice hulls are a great short-term aeration source, and they'll act as like the food source for your food web, you know. And so after a while, your worms and everything's gonna break it down, gonna eat it, and gonna turn it into plant-available silica. And so that plant will take that silica from the rice hulls, and they'll increase their cell walls and strengthen up the plant structure, but also they'll be able to uptake more water with that increased silica. And so rice hulls are really cool short-term aeration that will eventually give your plant benefit, but as we were talking about, like, it's going to disappear. And so you really need that long-term aeration. But also, like, when you're top dressing in between cycles, you can add both the short-term and the long-term aeration. And so, like, I've been adding like rice hulls, but also I've been chipping up my ganja stalks and using that those ganja chips, as well as the rice hulls, but also adding in a couple handfuls of biochar every time in between cycles. And so the idea with that aeration is I chop and drop my cover crop, and I prune my leaves and everything the next time and put it on top of all that aeration. And instead of just a bunch of organic matter turning into castings, I have a bunch of organic matter turning into castings around that aeration. And so, like, you know, I'm building soil structure over time instead of just feeding it organic matter and having that problem continue, you know. So I think that needs to be talked about more as like top dressing aeration sources. So yeah.
No, it is definitely, that's a fabulous topic actually, because it's something that not a lot of people mention, and I don't know if a lot of people consider that either on the multiple uses, but yeah, that's definitely a great idea. So are you running the Lux soil in your, do you do a bed, or how are you doing it? I guess it'd be a,
So yeah, I have a couple 4x8 tents, and one of them I do have a 4x4 grassroots fabric pot and or bed rather, and I absolutely love that. I'm working towards doing all big beds like that, but on the other sides I do have 25-gallon smart pots or whatever, and those ones aren't as cool as the grassroots. They don't have that inner lining, and so I do wrap saran wrap around that to kind of retain some more moisture, lower my relative humidity in the tents and everything, all that, you know. But I definitely recommend, if you're doing beds or pots, to get the grassroots or something that has that inner woven lining. That's a huge saver for sure.
what is the I mean, I've heard that discussed, and I've actually just kind of recently been like, man, I've got to wrap my pots or whatever, but just so everybody listening kind of follows along, like, what is the purpose of trying to wrap that fabric?
Yeah. So Steve Cantwell actually taught me this from Green Life Productions. I saw that he was putting saran wrap around his beds, and he said, one, it really these are only on beds that don't have the inner lining. So if it doesn't have that inner lining and you overwater, you're gonna have like leachate or runoff, you know. And you really don't want any leaching in these no-till beds. You want to keep all that good stuff in there. So, like, I don't know if you've heard of Soil Horizons or Leighton Morrison's teachings or anything like that. It's another tangent, but like the idea with that is to have that alluvial layer on the bottom, preventing any runoff, preventing any of your minerals or biology from escaping your pot. And so if you have this grassroot fabric pot with that lining in there, it takes away some of that risk of the runoff and all that. So shit, what were we talking about?
There's also even dry back too is kind of like the other thing I had heard, where like having it drying from the sides as well as the top wasn't as I guess best at keeping the moisture even across the bed, if that was the goal. So they were prepping that to try to eliminate that side evaporation, was kind of what I heard too. So it's interesting. I mean, it's it's definitely something I'm curious about. But
For sure.
So did you do the horizons then in the bed? Is it?
No, I haven't yet. So I've been I'm still renting property and whatnot, and so I'm trying to make the future move a little easier. Like I really was tempted to for sure, but I was like, damn, do I really want to bring in 100 pounds of rocks and all that stuff you put in my basement? Like, it's already such a bitch to remove all that soil. But someday I'll definitely give that a shot, doing the different soil horizons for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Leighton's a great guy, and actually, he was the first guest on the organic takeover. So
No shit, man, that's awesome.
yeah. So I look up to Leighton quite a bit. That technique is something I was kind of hoping to try to employ too, but I ran into that same thought where, because I'm running number 15 pots, and it was like, and I'm moving them by hand, you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah,
man, I really want another 30 freaking pounds in the bottom of these things, every one of them. It was kind of,
yeah.
so I did it on the outside. So I basically set them in the tray with rocks there, but it's not exactly.
Nice, yeah. I like doing that too, having the lava rock or the hydraulic balls or whatever underneath the pot to allow aeration, and if there is any runoff, it has somewhere to go, and then it'll wick back up into the pot for sure.
Yeah. Do you how are you watering the bed?
I'm hand watering. I do have some blue mats that I used a couple years ago, and then I moved and never set them back up. But been thinking about it for sure. I definitely want to get those set back up. But I don't know. I like maybe not having it always a consistent moisture. Like there's some benefit to letting it dry out a tiny little bit. Like obviously you're not trying to let it completely dry out. Shit, that reminded me. I used to say something. If your soil dries, your food web dies, or something like that. But
Yeah, if it dries, it dies.
yeah, but it actually just goes dormant, and a lot of them will come back once you get it wet again. But yeah, so I like letting it dry out a little bit and then giving it a heavy like compost tea or something like that. And I think that's just another abiotic stressor that will give the plant some benefit. And so like when we look at like terpene and cannabinoid production, it can be increased by biotic and abiotic stressors like within the right range. So like living and non-living stresses. And so like if you have okay, so this goes to what even are cannabinoids and terpenes like to the plant and the plant's point of view. We like to think of them as like being here for us, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. But like from the plant's point of view, they have primary and secondary metabolites, and so their primary metabolites are focused on like growth and reproduction. So like that's pretty much all nature is worried about, is like passing on their genes. And so that's their primary goal. And then they have these secondary metabolites that are there to kind of keep them protected and healthy from these stressors that I'm talking about. And so we think that the actual like trichomes on the plant, like the physical structure, is there to protect the plant tissue from like radiation. And so these plants are blasted with the sunlight and they could get sunburnt. And so they produce these trichomes to actually just kind of reflect some of that sunlight and create like a microclimate that protects their inner leaf structure and all that type of stuff. But then you look at terpene production, and that's a secondary metabolite that these plants are producing to, like a lot of them are antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal. And so like these plants are producing these compounds to compete against these biotic living microbes that are out there. And so that's why like living soil weed or living soil vegetables or anything, like they taste better, they have more nutrients because they're in environments that aren't sterile, and they're producing these secondary metabolites to ward off these competition out there. Sorry,
No, that's a cool take on it, man. Like, I mean, a lot of people think of it as like signaling and different things, but nobody's, you know, I guess I've never really considered that it's actually to help control. That's some of the way that it controls that rhizosphere too, you know. So
right.
That's cool. Are you running a cover crop then too? Is it?
Yeah, I'm using Wormies indoor blend, and so our indoor cover crop blend doesn't have brassicas or clovers in it, and so that's the difference between the indoor and the outdoor. Outdoor, we're all for as much biodiversity as possible. The indoor, a lot of the common problems with cover crops are like clovers tend to harbor pests, and brassicas, like we talked about earlier, will inhibit those fungal connections. And so cannabis likes the soil. A lot of people say different things, but if you look at like soil succession and like the soil food web point of view, cannabis would prefer a bacteria to fungi ratio of like around 0.8 to 1 to 1. And so like you want pretty much equal parts bacteria to fungi. And so fungi takes a lot longer to establish, and then the plants take a lot longer to make those connections with the fungi. But basically, you don't want a ton of brassicas in a small pot because you want to build up the fungal relationship. But yeah, so I do cover crops, and then I let them get 8 inches or so, and then I do a little chop and drop. But around the edges of my beds, I'll always let some of them go full term. I got some hairy vetch and some peas that are climbing up the side of my tent. I got the trellis specifically for them, and so I want them to really get nice and tall and fixate some nitrogen, but also just accumulate biomass. And so I'll chop and drop all of that and feed the soil next round, you know.
Now, how is that consider? Are you considering that your reamend, or are you still adding a reamending in between rounds?
So I'll be honest, I past couple years I've just been like blindly reamending, adding a little bit of like organic balance or some like BioLive from Down to Earth, some like balanced dry amendments, you know. But now I'm getting more and more into soil testing, and gonna learn exactly what my soil could use in between rounds, and so that's pretty exciting. But also there's so much to soil testing that it's just like that's like such a small snapshot of what's going on in the soil. Like I don't know, it's not a complete picture at all. The soil is like
sample size. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, sample size, and things are constantly changing, and so like, and even like samples from here to here, like you take a sample from right here, like 2 inches over, you're gonna have something different. And like there's always pockets of anaerobic activity in any soil, and things can change with watering and like from week to week or day to day, you know. And so I think once you have the biology, once you have biocomplete biology there, like the whole entire soil food web, then it just is like so intelligent. It's such like a bioreactor that you can put pretty much whatever into it, and it's going to figure out what the plant needs, like when it needs it. And like,
so when you do testing, you're talking actual the soil food web biological testing. Is that what you're meaning? Or?
Yeah, I was just referring to like saturated paste and like more like the mineral analysis. But yeah, once you Well, I know that I'm rocking Wormies. I'm using Wormies in my soil, and we do the microbiology testing at Wormies, and we know it's biocomplete. It's got everything you need in there. It's some good shit. So I know that that transfers over into my soil. But yeah,
I've seen the pictures of the microscope testing, and that is interesting that you mentioned that biocomplete, because that so it does actually have a quantification done to it to kind of see them. That's cool.
absolutely, man. There's so much when you look under the scope. It's pretty mind blowing.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense though why it's been such a like I just seen it visually, you know what I mean? That's where, but it's kind of makes sense though that with all the steps that you're taking to it, so that's cool. I just started doing some of the mineral balance testing too, so it's interesting. That's kind of where you've migrated to that. 'Cause it's like, yeah, after a while, you're just like you say, you're kind of like, I add some of this or some of that, and then for a minute, you're like, yeah, it's good, and then all of a sudden, something ain't quite right or whatever, and it's like you really don't know where you're at all. You know?
Yeah, and a lot of the issues is like you could be adding too much of something that isn't getting used up fast enough, and if you're using the cycle or the soil cycle and cycle again, you can get stuff that accumulates, and that could be you could run into some problems there. And so I definitely do recommend testing for sure, but I think it's never going to be all the answers. Like I think the biology is what really drives the mineral content, the mineral uptake, like everything. And so that's what's a little bit different about like these modified growing mediums and like these like indoor soilless mediums, and then outdoor. But like outdoor, there's enough minerals out there. It's just we're lacking the biology to make the minerals available. And so, and then I don't know, indoor. I'm just like really gung ho about the biology aspect, but it's equal parts for sure. You got the biology, the minerals, and then the physical soil structure, the aeration, and all that stuff that we're talking about with the gas exchange. But
Yeah, no, I'm on the same train, man. Like it's all like building the right structure for it so they can breed and function, and then putting the right biology in there to do their thing and get
you know,
water. That's cool. It's interesting to see, the same soil get sampled after a run and before. You know, I mean, I've noticed kind of the differences in between runs too, like the recommended top dressings have changed. I really haven't seen them be identical in any way. So it's kind of been an eye opener when you're like like I was kind of robotic about it. Like, all right, every time it gets this, and it gets this, and that was
you know, that could be dangerous when you make habits like that, or like even like if you're using like the secret sauce or whatever that your buddy was using in your garden, like you might not need that in your garden. Like your soil might already have enough of whatever you're adding in, and it could actually be like more detrimental than beneficial. So like that's the thing about like giving gardening advice. It's like everything is so situational. There's always so much to consider, and everything's so interrelated too. So like you tweak something, and it's gonna move something else down the line as well. So always something to consider. It's hard to give generalized advice. I mean, that's true about anything. It's dangerous to kind of generalize things. Everything's kind of situational. But
yeah. So, do you mulch at all then, or is that you're just relying on a cover crop totally? Or?
yeah, so I do mulch the cover crop down, but also I use some straw that's been inoculated with mushrooms, and so I've been kind of making this at Wormies and working on like methods to kind of ramp that up and start selling it. But basically, what Build the Soil was doing, like with the oyster logs. But I got my buddy at Michael Fowles Garden, and he does crazy mushroom production, and I think that we can start making some myceliated straw products real soon. And that stuff is a great addition to the mulch. So like I tramp down my cover crop. I like pretend I'm like a buffalo going across the
Up to plains, yeah.
across the plains. Yeah, exactly. And so like I used to chop it down with scissors and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's not really natural. That's not the idea of cover cropping, you know? So like the idea of cover cropping is like, yeah, every time those buffalo herds would go across the plains, they'd trample down the feet of grass, you know? And so like that's what created feet and feet of this rich soil across the Midwest, or uh, throughout the Great Plains of America and whatnot, which we depleted almost entirely over the past 100 years or so. But anyways, yeah, trampling down that cover crop, and then I throw down some vermi mulch from Wormies and some of that straw that's inoculated with. I've been doing a variety of different mushrooms. I got some fun ones in there right now, which I'm super excited about. But these yeah, so the vermi mulch from Wormies is really cool. We have two different size screenings of our vermicompost. We have a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 inch. And so the 1/8 inch is the fine vermicompost, like worm castings, but the 1/4 inch is these like chunkies of the vermi mulch. And so it's got a ton of organic matter in there, mainly pieces of wood chips, all like fungal dominant. You could see pieces of their strands of hyphae on there, you know, ton of mycelium, little pieces of straw, eggshell, but a ton of worm cocoons as well. They get through that size. And so I use that as just like an inoculation as well as a physical mulch layer because you got all that organic matter on top. And so trample down the cover crop, a little bit of vermi mulch, and then the straw on top, and then I just let that do its thing. And then, like, I've been experimenting with adding more cover crop seeds and like throughout flower, just to kind of stimulate microbial activity. Once like those seeds are sprouting in there, they're producing all those enzymes and stimulating the microbial activity and everything, you know. So I feel like you can like kind of excite these plants just by like planting other seeds, and like kind of the same idea with the seed sprout teas is like you can sprout these seeds somewhere else and then blend them all up, and you have all these enzymes and these phytonutrients. It's like the same thing as eating microgreens. Those seed sprouts are loaded full of good stuff, you know. So,
yeah, no. So you're talking just sprouting them. At what point in flower are you trying to sprout those? Like
I don't know.
soil is what I mean. Like
Exactly, yeah. So last time, and I'm new to all this, and I don't have a ton of space to do like all these side by sides and stuff. So last time I did it like halfway through flower, and so the idea with that is I had trampled down so much and covered it up with that straw. I was like, damn, did I get rid of too much of my cover crop? And so I just wanted to add some of it back. But once I did that, I got thinking about it. I was like, well, maybe it's stimulating some good stuff for a plant that's already there. But I don't know. A lot of this is just.
No, it absolutely is, and that's the same line of thinking I've been on with that too. It's like, well, if it's good to just pour it on top of a seed sprout tea, why wouldn't it be good to just germinate them right in the soil?
For sure. I think, yeah, the plants are really where the microbes start to. Okay, so like the soil can be rocking and healthy with the microbes, but like once there's a plant in there communicating with them, that's where things really start to take off. Once the plants are producing these exudates and exchanging with the microbes, that's where the cycle is complete. And so I think as much roots in the soil as possible, as much exudates that are being pumped down in there, that's all beneficial for sure.
No, that's an interesting thing too. Somebody else had just said this. Maybe it was Matt Powers, but like, yeah, like the whole cycle is depleting energy from the system. The only thing that's adding energy to the system is the process of photosynthesis. So, like, more things you got photosynthesizing, more things adding energy into that soil and into that rhizosphere. Otherwise, it's always, you can have the life there, but it's basically running on, you know, fuel that it's going to run out of, so to speak.
100%, man.
Yeah,
Well put.
That's dope, man. And I've been using the vermi mulch too. So whoever's idea that was a killer idea. The exact same thing. I got it the one time, and it was like you said about the cocoons. It was crazy. It's like totally an inoculation of worms in there, and they absolutely blow up so fast. It's unreal how the red wigglers take off once they're there. But I've seen predator mites. I've seen, you know, other kind of detriphores or whatever, arthropods. But I've also seen millipedes. I've seen centipedes in there. So it comes with a
Romo beetles.
Yeah, man, it's like a total inoculation. I love using it. Actually, I think I've gotten 5 rounds right now where I've put that on as I've transplanted or whatever to do that. It functions well, but you're using the straw on top of that still? Is that?
Yeah, and I don't like a whole lot of rules to it or anything, but yeah, because the vermi mulch is so like coated in the castings and so like biologically active, it's still not like a complete mulch because a mulch layer is used to kind of protect all those microbes. And so like the fact that the vermi mulch is still microbes being exposed, you know, like you want something over top. And so I think of like the vermi mulch is kind of like the start to like your humus layer, maybe a little bit in between like your actual mulch and your soil organic matter, like constantly just breaking down and feeding that humus layer.
Yeah, no, that's something I was just recently considering too, because I've been trying. So King Stropharia or the garden giant or whatever you want to call it, that's been a big topic, or not a big topic, but it's been a topic in the soil food web kind of thing realm of adding that in for the nutrient cycling ability of it. So I kind of took that stride to get some and break up a block and see if I can get it going in the soil. So I was actually getting some Friday from Darren at D's Bags.
Nice, man.
Yeah, Darren's cool, man. I seen you know him too, right?
Yeah, he just hit me up today and told me that he was doing those garden kings. So I'm excited. I'm definitely gonna get a couple of those.
Yeah. So that's where I was considering was the straw, and I was almost, but I'm like, I don't know. I was kind of 50-50 on it with whether the mushrooms would take off and just the vermi mulch itself, being that it's a lot of wood material, you know what I mean?
No doubt. And that's kind of cool about mushrooms is like you can think of like different inoculation points and like you want different sizes of physical like inoculation points for them. And so like you can have some of the small vermi mulch, but also you can have some of the straw. And so like, and then if you were to take some of the straw and like break it up and have like that straw dust, like that dust stuff is going to break or get broken down the fastest. The fungi is going to eat that fastest. But then maybe they'd go to the vermi mulch next because it's the next biggest size up. And then that straw is more like a long-term food. But then you look at like the physical composition, and so like the vermi mulch, all that wood material, all that lignin still, that's going to be really long-term food source for them. And so like it might take over because it's smaller inoculation size, it's a smaller point, but then it's going to be like a longer term food source for them. So like I don't know, just different size aggregates are cool to consider. And if you only have big chunky stuff, it's going to take longer for the fungi to take over. So it's probably in your best interest to add something a little bit smaller to fill in those pore spaces, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting because I was always thinking that the bigger chips were maybe a little more what I wanted because they got something to kind of grab hold and grow into a little bit of structure, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But,
and you definitely do want those for the long term, you know. But to kind of speed up inoculating those big chips, you could use some of the smaller stuff.
yeah, no doubt. So, are you actually getting the fruiting body of the mushroom out of the straw then? As,
I've seen it a couple times, but no, you got to keep it really kind of moist and a little bit too moist for the ideal like conditions for cannabis. And so you always got to be thinking like, what's your main objective? And like, cannabis is the primary crop there, you know. And so like, I want lower relative humidity than what mushrooms really need to thrive. But I do use like those humidity domes on top of my soil, and so I will get some mushrooms that pop up inside those humidity domes, but it kind of retains that microclimate, that high humidity in there without, especially during flower, you know, you want 65% humidity kind of at tops. You don't really want to go over 70. And these mushrooms really prefer like 90% plus humidity. So
so they'll grow in less, right? But they're just not going to fruit, right? They're waiting for that certain humidity to fruit.
yeah, exactly. So the fungi is definitely still doing its thing underneath, especially if you have a nice thick mulch layer protecting it. But yeah, they're not gonna to fruit until you get like a big rain event or like you water them heavy. The humidity goes up. But like, also I've been thinking, we just got like all these crazy rains here in Michigan, and I was looking at my outdoor plants and like considering how important the aeration in my soil was because I didn't want them to get too waterlogged. But like a couple days after all the rain, I was looking at my cover crop and all the mushrooms that were fruiting, and like really just giving thanks to them. And like they took so much of that excess moisture out of the soil and like put it in all the cover crop. And like mushrooms are mainly water weight. Like if you ever cook mushrooms, you'll see them decrease in size like crazy. They'll shrink right up. And so like when you think about in the soil, you have all these like microscopic hyphae, all these fungal filaments, and the mycelia will take all this excess moisture, and they'll take like a tremendous amount of it, and they'll push it up, and they'll create these mushrooms out of these tiny little threads of fungi. And it's like pretty fucking miraculous. But like when you think about like how much water is taken out of the soil, it's like, damn, it's really regulating like the water content, you know. But also it's like mushrooms are just like the fruiting body of the fungi, as you probably know. It's just a way for it to reproduce and pop up the mushroom and spread its spores, and the spores will travel somewhere else and they'll propagate and germinate and all that stuff.
Well, it makes sense why they want a humid situation. And I never even, I mean, you just connected a light or dot for me, I guess, is like
right.
why they would wait for a humid situation. They need that much water to actually make the fruiting body. So
Yeah, for sure. It's more than the humidity up above ground. It's all the moisture underground that is creating that humidity.
yeah, it is miraculous, man. They're pretty amazing. The more you, I mean, it's a rabbit hole on all itself, the whole fungi and soil remediation and all that. But it's cool what they do. That's kind of why I've been like seeking out, trying to figure out ways to make that happen. Not only, you know, like in the indoor, but in the outdoor. I got a vegetable garden. I'm that dude with the COVID, the COVID garden, I guess you call them now, or the Freedom Gardens or whatever before. Now they're called COVID gardens. It's funny. But yeah, I mean, even out there, you know, it's like I mean, I had some trees cut down and the stumps ground up, and it's like, well, man, I could probably add some mushrooms to that and put a tarp over it, and next year have a pretty nice soil right there where that tree was. You know?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, definitely should.
So speaking of trees, I know you know a mutual friend, Big Jar Grows, but he's gonna listen to this tomorrow, and he just chopped down a bunch of trees and had them ground up, and now he's got a bunch of these wood chips. what he wanted me to ask you, what is his best plan of trying to turn that into a quality compost that he can use in an easy way? Yes.
For sure. So, I mean, right off the bat, wood chips right now have been interesting to me because I'm trying to grow a bunch of different kinds of mushrooms and like just start these like what's the term I'm looking for? It's like these mulch piles that will fruit the mushrooms, and like then you could take that um, these mushroom patches, I guess. But yeah, I want to inoculate the compost, like different compost rows with different mushrooms. But mushrooms should be employed everywhere, man. Everybody should be using mushrooms in their gardens, in their yards, and so I'd take at least a lot of those wood chips and devote those to inoculating those with fungi and trying to grow out and myceliate all those. But if you're trying to create like good compost, then I mean compost is a vague term, but if you want to do like a hot composting or vermicomposting or whatever, like you'd have to mix in some of the green nitrogen material that we were talking about, because those wood chips are all pretty much carbon. But anything that you do is going to be really beneficial to soak those wood chips first. And so like wood chips are kind of like hydrophobic. They don't take in water. So like if you're just hitting it with the hose, all that water is just going to go around it, go to the ground, you know. But if you're to take those wood chips and put it in a huge tub or a trash can or whatever and fully submerge them for like 24 or 48 hours, a couple days even, and just fully soak them, get them waterlogged, then they're going to retain that moisture a lot longer. Whatever you mix them in with is going to be a lot better. And then once you water like your compost pile, it's going to take in that water instead of kind of repelling it like wood chips would naturally do. So that's something to consider, is just really moisture content is huge for dealing with wood chips.
Yeah, that's a big tip. I always thought the wood chips would kind of hold a little bit of them. I mean, especially if they're freshly cut, right? Like they're wet.
Yeah, if they're freshly cut, they will. But like I was saying, like after they've been soaked, they'll definitely hold water for long term, and that's the idea with like these logs that we see on the ground. You know, they just become sponges and they retain moisture forever, and until they are returned into the soil. But if you have like a big pile of wood chips that's sitting up off the ground, you know, it's a huge mound and it's baking in the sun, then a lot of that's gonna bake off and dry up really quick, and then not let in the water or retain the water very easily.
So I've seen you. You mentioned water and wood, well, water in the wood, but building a Hugo bed, and I've seen pictures on Instagram of you building Hugo beds too. I mean, with that is, I don't know if that's something you wanted to mention, your process on that. It looked like you had kind of a neat way going.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. I dug my own at Wormies last year, and then I just did one with Nick Risden. I saw you guys had him as a guest the other week, and then I'm planning one out with Terp Wizard right now. I'm about to go over there next week and dig out a Hugo culture mound with him too. I'm starting to become the Hugo guy, I guess. But yeah, we like digging these trenches instead of building the mounds, and so one like wind factor, like if you have these big mounds and these tall ganja plants on top of the mounds blowing in the wind, that could be bad. But two, like it's going to be hard. You're going to need to be up on ladders for these big plants. Three, like neighbors could see it, situational, you know. But four, a lot of times we want greenhouses over top of it, and like space is a big factor. You know, you got to have enough headspace, and so digging these trenches into the ground instead of building the mounds, we've been liking that. But anyways, you dig down however deep you want to go. Here in Michigan, we have this really nice loamy clay soil, and you can dig down pretty deep before you hit the bedrock or anything, or the water table. So we've been doing like 3-4 feet down, and then taking however. So this is all situational, you know. Like I've been doing this on big properties where we're fortunate enough to have woods close by, and so like I go throughout the woods and I get as big of logs as I can possibly drag out of there, and I look for these nice broken down logs. And so like the longer that they've been there, and the more that they're inoculated and moist already, like if you could visually see some microbes rocking on there, then it's a good log for sure. And you take that, throw it down into the pit. Constantly adding water throughout the whole process, getting everything nice and soaked. And then from there you start building up with smaller logs and sticks and everything. I don't know, there's a bunch of instructions on how to build tubes. It's basically just a bunch of different layers of whatever you have, but all throughout you're adding these layers of these goodies that you're bringing in from your property, or like I've been bringing the vermi mulch and spent mushroom blocks is what I've been offering these people. And so you're adding all that in, but then you're adding in some of your native soil that you dug out of that trench, because you want to be like remediating that native stuff and turning that into your final soil. And so like at Nick's place, it was mainly sand, and so we dug out all that sand there and added in all the stuff, but we're constantly adding in the layers of sand. And after a couple of years, it's going to be really nice soil. And that grittiness of the sand and the charge that it holds is going to add a lot of benefit for sure.
So in the sand, you probably had a little different focus than like a heavy clay.
Yeah, definitely. And I might have misspoke earlier that Michigan isn't all general. Like I was saying, like Nick's is really sandy, but other soils are really clay rich, you know. And so, but my point was, you can dig down a couple of feet here. Nick was saying like he's from Kentucky, and you could dig down like a foot or so before you're hitting limestone, and it's hard stuff. You couldn't even take a tractor to it. He was saying like, so hugels weren't as much of an option there for like digging down. So that is another situational thing where maybe digging or building a mound on top would be beneficial, you know.
So so for Nick, like where he's got a sandy base, what would be the focus for somebody that's listening and they go, man, my whole yard's sand too? Like, how would they start building that into a better kind of usable garden soil?
Yeah, so I mean, you could dig these hugelkultur mounds and like kind of customize your own soil, or like if you're not trying to do that, you could just add as much organic matter as possible. And I know we're big on like no-till, but I think in sandy soils, especially the first couple times when you're trying to build structure, like there's a time and place for everything, but I do recommend tilling. So I just did this at my sister's place. She's living in a yard that's like entirely sand, and so we're trying to grow a garden there, and it's totally possible if you have the right structure and the right biology. But that biology needs something to latch onto, and so like that's the problem with super sandy soil is there's not enough physical structure for these fungi and these soil organisms to like physically latch onto and set up camp. And so you get a big rain event and all these microbes are washed right out. So if you were to take all your leaves that you collect and compost all your small sticks and everything and till that right into the sand and add all these inoculation points that we were talking about earlier, physical structure and inoculation points for these fungi to grab onto and create more structure, you know. And over time, all that stuff will break down, it'll work in, and you add in a lot of organic matter into the sand and start building that structure there. But after you do that, you got to put the cover crops in, and as we were saying, all the benefits of just having plants that are photosynthesizing and pumping exudates in, but also those roots are creating that physical soil structure, and they're excreting these enzymes and everything, and attracting a lot of bacteria that will produce stuff like glomalin, and that like acts as like a glue source and physically binds these soil aggregates together and builds structure over time. But it all starts with that organic matter. You need something for the biology to latch onto, but then of course you need the biology there too. So situational, you know, so like some yards might be totally lack of the biology and the organic matter. Some might have one there, you know.
So now say on the opposite end, if I'm a guy that's got, with all this rain, I got a big puddle in my yard, I got a real heavy clay going on, like what kind of approach would somebody want to do to start that, you know, making that a better soil? Like,
yeah, so like broad forking is great. Like physically put some holes down in there and kind of loosen things up without tilling it up. But also cover cropping is the answer for these heavy clay soils too. You want something that's gonna get down in there and break up that heavy clay structure and provide the aeration and the paths for the water to infiltrate. And so like squash, they have pretty thick roots that drill down through really tough soil structures. But things like alfalfa, they have roots that can grow like up to like 17 feet long, like down into the soil. So it's like, that's huge, you know. So like if just cover cropping and getting these plants onto these soils and letting them grow up and get nice and thick and let their roots explore and tap into everything. I think that's the way to go for sure.
so breaking up action, but is that something, would you ever want to like be like, man, there's so much clay, we got to bring in something like sand or something? Is that ever like a case or?
For sure, and it depends on the size of the operation. Like if you're just trying to do a little garden bed, you know, yeah, you can bring in some sand or whatnot. But like large scale, we're really trying to avoid like altering our existing soil structures. Like we don't want to bring in something from somewhere else and change our existing structures, because like nothing is a mistake, you know. Like everything can thrive. You can have like thriving ecosystems everywhere if you know how to read the land and to team with these microbes and to like team with the plants and everything. I think I think the biology is the way to go.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's definitely an interesting effect. I guess my eyes have been open to more and more, is just the effect of like what you're talking about with biology in a biocomplete realm, where you're actually given a full soil food web and seeing how that actually, like, you can physically feel and see the change that happened in that soil, and it's hard to describe, but it's like something you notice once you've used it. You know what I mean? It's like, wow,
100%.
it's pretty. Because honestly, so I just seen this actually in. So it's my ex's yard, but so when I was there, I started a garden, and I kind of been just keeping it going with friends or whatever.
Nice.
But it went fallow for a few years, and then restarting it, we didn't. I mean, I didn't till or nothing. We just put cardboard down, put some compost on top, and that was early in the year, like February or whatever. So I had time, and they planted into it, and then this year going back to it, it blew me away, man. I was putting a stake down into it, and like I don't know, the previous year I could maybe hand push it down into the soil like 4 to 6 inches or whatever, and then you're kind of hammering it the rest of the way in.
Yeah.
this year I had it down, I mean, 14 inches and the dang thing hardly stands up. I was just blown away
For
by
sure.
that. Like it was literally just very minimal amounts. I applied a compost kind of extract a
Yeah.
couple times, and we applied the compost to it at the beginning of the season. But it was just blew my mind how much that loosened up just from that little amount done.
100%, man. And that's something else that I should have mentioned about like both of these, the sand and the clay structure, but like adding these biocomplete compost extracts or teas, and just really inoculating everything and providing it with the biology. They'll alter the structure as well as these cover crops and the other things that we mentioned. So yeah, and as you said, doesn't take much time at all. It's visual like change, and it's so exciting when you get to see the work that you put in like improve the land. And like you said, like you're at your ex's place. I've been renting properties everywhere, and like it's so cool to improve my yard at all those places and then move out and oh well, I won't see the benefit of what I sowed there or whatever. I won't get to reap that, but I think it's what the world needs. I think everybody should be making their property a better place everywhere, even if they don't reap the benefits. It's the right thing to do.
That's cool, man. Well, you get to drive by hopefully one day and be like, "Yeah, I planted that."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. Just kind of shifting gears on the biology thing. I've also seen you kind of making some what looked like maybe DOM or KNF type preparations, and I've seen your stinging nettles treatment to your forearm. I was kind of wondering about that one for sure.
Yeah, that nettle flogging, it's called.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. When I first started working at Wormies, I had never experienced stinging nettles before, and it fucked me up, man. I got these huge like rashes on me or whatever, and just irritating as fuck. But then I realized that the nettle has like the antidote within it. So like if you were to actually take that nettle and pulverize it, get the juices out of it, and apply it to the sting, it neutralizes the sting. And so like that fascinated me. And then I was out there all the time, and I was growing some ganja out there last year, and just in a huge patch of nettles. And so I was touching it every single day, and really built up an immunity to it. And it's nothing now. But if I were to take it now and flog myself like you saw me doing, basically the idea is it's really good for people with like rheumatoid arthritis and shit. There's one more thing, but basically it will draw some stuff out to like the surface of the skin, and it helps with that type of pain. And I do that like so I did that the week that I was turning a bunch of these bioreactors, and so that is one thing that these bioreactors aren't actively aerated. It's a different style of composting, but I do have to take the walls off of that and flip that with pitchforks. And so basically I was doing that for a couple days straight, and my forearms were fucking sore. And so I did that. I flogged myself, and I really noticed some relief once that pain, or I don't know the science terms to describe it, but there's research out there for sure. It's some interesting shit.
I didn't realize it was that. I figured it was to build up some type of an immunity or something. Was kind of what I was thinking. I didn't realize it had, some form of a medicinal effect, which makes sense. I mean, nettle's a pretty amazing plant.
Dude, nettle's so diverse. Got a lot of benefits. Any of these dynamic accumulators are pretty magical plants for sure. Cannabis being one of them.
Yeah. Do you use those in any kind of a ferment or a tea or any?
Yeah. So I don't know. It's pretty similar or terminology, whatever. This what's the word I'm thinking of? Is it JLF, the Jadam liquid fertilizer? Same thing as like just like a water composting is how I used to think about it. So like I was doing this stuff last year, and I had not gotten the Jadam book yet, but I'd saw Josh and Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine kind of doing like this water composting, and it's pretty much the same exact thing. But you take these dynamic accumulators, chop them all up, put it in the water. But what's different about this one is like you use a bunch of different plants instead of it being like specific and the Jadam one, I think. But you take it, you mix in a microbial inoculant. So I'd use like leaf mold, and I was making bokashi, so I tried bokashi. But also I found a lot of success just putting like these spent mushroom blocks in there, and that mycelium would start eating the stuff that's on the top layer, and it's like shit's wild. But anyway,
like is that
yeah,
wow.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, so like only on like the top, like the pellicle or whatever that thin layer on top, you'll have like the nettle leaves floating up. But yeah, great way to activate it super fast. And so basically, you leave it there for like 10 to 14 days, and then I was doing like the Jadam style of just feeding it anaerobically, but I don't know. I think if you have access to electricity and a brewer and a pump and everything, I think there's a lot of benefit in aerating those those anaerobic ferments after, and kind of. So like the idea of the water composting is it's breaking down like the cellulose, the physical structure of the plant, and it's extracting all the good stuff from in it. All the amino acids and nutrients and all the good stuff that's held in the juices of the plant. And so you're taking that and giving it the biology. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you're introducing air after the 14 days, and so like
yeah. And so after the 14 days of anaerobic, I'll bubble it for 24 hours, and then I'll apply it. And I don't know, I just feel, I don't know, there's if you're diluting enough with the anaerobic stuff, it's cool, but there could be some bad stuff that happens if you overdo those anaerobic ferments. But again, I don't know. I don't have a ton of experience with it. I just saw Josh and Kelly doing that. I highly respect them. So I was like,
yeah, me too.
I'll try this way.
No, definitely, man. They even like when you mentioned that sprouting the seed, the cover crop mid flower, Josh and Kelly were people I've heard talk about that. They kind of have a different. They were running through actually different plants. I thought when I had heard it, where they were propagating these types in the spring when things were little, and then they'd chop that and they'd put in a different kind of cover crop for whatever, so they were kind of ranging through
For sure.
as they went through that season.
That's awesome. And I want to get more into all that and like figuring out cover crops that have like similar, or like learning more about like the flowering times. And so like always having like a pollen source around to kind of act as like a banker plant, and to feed some of these beneficials, because that's what a lot of the people don't consider is like they'll buy beneficial insects of some sort and apply them to their garden, and if there's not a good amount of pest pressure, then they're going to run out of food and die or take off, and so having a pollen source around is going to keep these beneficials around, even when there's not heavy pest pressure. And so that's what's ideal, is you want these good guys to be there when there's no pest pressure. And then if there is a bad guy, it's no big deal. They're totally outnumbered.
Yeah.
Another thing with, if you're going to be buying beneficials, is like wet down your leaves first. I used to, especially like outdoors, but indoors too, like if you apply any of these beneficials that you just got shipped there, like the first thing that they're thinking of is, holy fuck, I need some water and I need some food. And so like if you apply them to some dry leaves and you don't wet down your soil or anything, they're gonna take off looking for water. And so if you one, water down your soil, but then two, give a light misting to all your leaves, they're gonna stick around a whole lot more for sure.
That's the tip right there, man. I actually didn't realize that. I always kind of wondered about wetting them down, just if that would be a bad thing or not. But whenever you put them on, it's like they come in that vermiculite, so if you wet everything down, the damn shit sticks to your leaves.
You're right. Yeah, no, that is a problem. I don't like applying those vials of vermiculite to the leaves. It gets that dust on them, and I much prefer like the sachets, like those little pouches that you can hang on the branches, you know. And so like I don't know. So we talked about the vermi mulch and the Wormies products having a ton of beneficial life in there, and I like to think that there's enough to protect the plants full term, but like I find that most of that life stays in the soil, and so getting these I order beneficial mites in those pouches for I get them right before I flip to flower, and I know that I'm not gonna be doing any more foliar sprays, so that's kind of my IPM throughout flower is beneficials. But I've been thinking about just getting those pouches and putting some vermi mulch in there and hanging that on the stem, you know, and so like all the biology that's in there could then crawl out and actually be on the phyllosphere, like on the leaves instead of down in the rhizosphere in the soil. But I don't know, mites can be expensive, but I definitely recommend them. And then knowing that like Wormies has all these mites in the soil, like I think I'm going to be doing that in the future for sure instead of ordering them.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought on it that they're already there, kind of, you know.
That's what's so cool about our product. It's like I don't know, you look at Build a Soil and they're selling rove beetle or like any insectary or whatnot. They sell rove beetles, beneficial mites. Now there's places selling like pill bugs even for like a stupid amount of money, and then you gotta overnight ship them and like
another stupid amount of money for the shipping.
It's cool if you don't have any other options, but damn, like all that stuff is in good compost. Like you should just get some good compost for sure. And so I was super blessed once I started. Like I pretty much was on this organic train since I started growing. I like messed around with Fox Farms for like one cycle, and I was like, enough of this measuring bottles and pH and shit. And like I was still so disconnected from nature and the soil and everything. I was like, this is not what I wanted from growing weed. And so I was really fortunate to get on the organic living soil path right away and found Wormies right away, and have always been blessed with that biology and didn't even realize like that other soils were lacking that, especially just like the macro stuff, like the stuff that I could see physically with my eyes, you know, all these predators that we're talking about. So I don't know, just really fortunate to have always been teamed up with that good biology. It set me on the right path for sure.
No doubt, man. I'm in that same camp. I feel fortunate for it for sure. Because there's a lot of people you talk to, and they're just like, I don't know where to get this. I don't know if there's, you know, a local one to me. And I'm just kind of like, I got a local one, and they're like the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing, man. What you guys do, it's awesome for sure.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Just another tip: when you're adding any like dry amendments, you should mix them in with some castings. And so, like one, if you ever like top dressed some dry amendments, you'll notice like all that dust gets kicked up into the air. It's like if you have plants in flower, any dust that gets on them, like that's no bueno. You don't want to smoke that. But also any of that dust in the air could be bad, especially if it's like biologically active. You don't want to be inhaling any of these particles, but like especially living ones, you know, that could be really bad for our health. And so, and then three, you're just losing money. the dust blows away in the wind. But to mitigate all that, you can mix it in with the castings, and so like the moisture of the castings are gonna prevent all that dust from blowing off. But two, you got to look at like the dry amendments themselves. So anything that is like a meal isn't plant available yet. It needs to be broken down by the biology. And so if you mix it in with this biology via the castings, you're really increasing the amount of, or decreasing the time that it takes to make those amendments plant available, you know. So kind of getting two birds stoned at once there, not losing any dust, but also making it more available.
Yeah, bringing in the nutrient cyclers to do the cycle the nutrient you just apply to make sense. Yeah. I actually like that you mentioned that with breathing it and whatnot, because that's something a lot of people don't talk about either, is like breathing protection. I mean, a lot of these rock dusts and stuff, I mean, you don't want to be breathing in, you know, these powdered rock, powdered bone, like steamed bone meal and some of that, or guanos. It's like,
guanos are
absolutely horrible for you to breathe in, for sure. You get sick real quick. And especially now too, like everybody's so masks. I mean, like we just went through all this with the mask, you know, everybody should be like up on like breathing filtration, right? Like it shouldn't be a 101 anyway, but it is, man. It's something that I think a lot about it, just because it's, in the industry I was in was auto repair, and like dust and all that shit was around everywhere, like when you're cleaning something or doing whatever. So it was always kind of thought, like, you know, in my mind that, man, you're breathing that in. So yeah, it was kind of no brainer there to make sure you're covering it. But I see a lot of people mix soils, and they're doing a top dress video of something, and they're just man, and it's like you can see the dust flying, dude. Like it's right there.
Totally. Yeah, I don't fuck around with that shit. That's why I'm really onto sharing that little tip that I learned. Just mix it in, you know, like you don't want to be breathing in any of that dust. You don't want to lose any of that dust. So there's multiple benefits. So if you ever have any dried product or dried powdered product, you know, mix it in with some castings or something that's gonna retain that. Yeah.
That tip. So do you guys mess around with like, I guess leachate would be what it was called, or like the liquid coming out of the bottom of a worm bin or whatever? Is that something?
Right. So us not having like actual worm bins, it being on the ground, we don't have any runoff or leachate. But yeah, I have like my home scale, which I don't do it anymore. Like I was still doing like a worm composting at home, and then I was like, man, I'm doing too much shit. I work at I work at Wormies. I don't need to be doing this at home. Like, but yeah, so like 2 years ago, I had a worm tower or worm factory 360 or whatever, and so that does have a spigot on the bottom, and that, I mean, good stuff, but mainly just dilute, like 1 to 1,000 pretty much, you know. A little bit goes a long way.
Do you recommend aerating it at all, or any just?
Yeah, I'm a fan of aeration for sure.
Okay. That's cool. It's something I've never really used. I don't know. I just, every time I see it, I kind of like, man, I want to try to utilize that somehow, but I never dare because I'm not sure what's all going on there.
It totally depends on what you're putting into the worm bin too. It's another thing. It's like, man, I can't fucking generalize this and tell you to use it if you're putting trash into your worm bin. And so like, I don't know, that's another tangent, but that's what kind of got me onto this living soil thing, and just this whole entire lifestyle that I'm on is I was going to school and getting more and more into growing my own weed, and like I said, wasn't digging the Fox Farms and the Pro Mix, and so I built my own soil off of like Subcool's recipe and that type of stuff. Just learning from online and trial and error and stuff, but getting more into all that, and I ended up getting a worm bin and started composting my food waste. And I realized that I was eating like absolute trash. You know, I was going to school all the time. I was a busy music student, but I couldn't put anything good into my worm bin, and I was like, man, I gotta change this. And so I started eating better, eating more fruits and veggies and stuff, and feeding my worms better, and creating better soil, and then growing better ganja, and just the interconnectedness. Like once you're creating your own compost, and then building your own soil, and then reaping the fruits of that labor, and then it's just so satisfying, you know.
That's funny. You adjusted what you were eating so that you could feed your worms better.
Yeah, man. For real.
That's awesome, man.
And that's the truth about a lot of these growers. And I mean myself sometimes too. I'm still guilty of it. I mean, we're in the toxic world. It is what it is. But I take a lot better care of my soil and my plants than I do myself sometimes. And that's how it was for like the first year or so of me doing this. And I learned about a microbiome, and like that just fucking set everything off. Like we're all billions of living, breathing microbes, and everything is, you know. And like once you start thinking of yourself as billions of living beings instead of just one, like you start treating yourself different, and that includes what you put into your body and on your body, and a whole bunch of shit. But like just getting your hands in the soil and physically like inoculating yourself with this biocomplete compost is like so beneficial. And then through this bokashi making, I got a lot more into like the science of probiotics and these beneficial bacteria and everything. And it's like seriously the same list of microbes in these soils that are in our guts. And like we are from the soil, like we're humic beings and all that. And there's a reason why they say like trust your gut, and your gut is your second brain. But like once you have a healthy gut microbiome and you're eating probiotic foods, and you're taking care of yourself, like you think differently, and like you physically just have this intuition, and I don't know, benefits on so many levels. I highly recommend that people eat more raw fruits and vegetables, and drink their probiotics, and eat fermented fruits, and or eat fermented foods, and all that stuff. There's so many things you can do. And I'm not saying vegetarian or vegan or anything like that at all. But like regenerative, like you should eat and choose what you eat off of like what it's doing to the soil. And so, but there's a whole lot of
it's an interesting thing,
philosophy and morals to diet and whatnot. But inoculate yourself is what I'm getting at. Drink some tea, drink some probiotics.
Well, a lot of that gets into like even the endophytes too, like the ability of the biology to actually live inside the cell of the of the plant cell. So
100%, man.
It's actually, but one person was talking about the probiotics I was listening to too, where being that it's in the cell in a fiber that your digestive system's not necessarily breaking down all the way. It can carry all the way through your digestive system. So like it's inoculating all the way through versus just like drinking like a kombucha. A lot of those will kind of just stay in your upper part of your digestive or whatever.
Right.
Never necessarily make it all the way through. Where like, yeah, eating fresh vegetables that have good biology, it goes further than you really realize.
No doubt. That's a huge part of it. It's like just eating fresh shit, eating leaves when you're outside, and like not spraying shit with the poison, so you can just eat a fresh leaf, you know, and it's covered with good biology. I think it's like 50,000 microbes per like square centimeter or some shit like that. And most of it's the lactobacillus and the yeast. Like it's crazy prevalent everywhere.
So you just brought up another interesting question, I guess, with the not spraying with pesticides and whatnot. So I got a fairly new vegetable garden going, and I've noticed some things going on there with beetles this year that were kind of crazy and whatnot, which maybe
Yeah.
a tough one, but is there what I'm getting at? Is there a regiment of IPM that you kind of recommend or found that really works good?
Yeah, we've been having trouble with the striped cucumber beetles on our squash plants out at Wormies, and I just recently, um, I mean, I've been really liking the Jadam wedding agent, um, like as a surfactant, but like a heavy dose of that will just physically like encase these soft-bodied pests and kind of like suffocate them, and then after 24 hours, it off gases and it's not on the plants or soil or anything anymore. But so I've been using that, but also Uvaria bassiana. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a entomopathogenic fungi, and so that'll take over these insects and mummify them, inoculate them with fungi, and so like they'll actually like turn into like this white mycelium will become fuzzy and stuff. And I haven't seen any fruiting bodies come out of these, but it's similar to like cordyceps, being like entomopathogenic. So I don't know. Have you seen anything about like the brood X cicadas? Um,
Um, I haven't, but I mean, as far as like Bavaria bassiana, yeah, I mean, I've used that before, but
okay.
does that work on cucumber beetle?
I just literally did it like 2 days ago, and I haven't seen anything yet. But you
I'm
know,
curious because I got some. I'll go freaking. That's the one Benny. Like you have all this stuff already for the garden, so your outdoor veggies get like
oh, absolutely, man,
weeds.
for real. Any little thing that's on like the bottom of my can, I got extra like it's going to the house plants or the vegetables or something. Like everything's just happy as fuck over here for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. I got a mystery plant. I think it's a pumpkin or a squash. I'm not quite sure quite yet, but it's fruiting. But I call it the mystery plant because I didn't plant it. It just I mean, it must have been a seed in the compost I used or something, and it was from my own home compost pile that I turned, and I got another plant popping out of the compost pile after I turned it now. So it's like whatever was in there, I don't know if it was a pumpkin or what. I'm kind of interested. It's funny
For sure.
the adventures of growing, right? The mystery plant.
Yeah.
Dude, it's thriving though. It's like one of the happiest plants I got in the garden. It's funny how
With
that is.
volunteers, absolutely. Especially, uh, I mean, yeah, they want to live, but like the seeds that were grown in these living soil systems and are encoded with these endophytes, like you were saying, like the endophytes are like on in the leaves or whatnot, but they're also into the seeds and they're encoded into the seeds, and that's why like getting organic seeds and like buying cannabis seeds from like breeders that are breeding and living soils is so important. You get so much of a faster like benefit. So like I don't know. Have you ever taken like clones from synthetic plants
Yes.
and
I
put them
actually
into
just recently did this. It went
yeah
through like pretty much like a re-veg
yeah
situation, and it was crazy how it went. I'm imagining and picturing it in my head that it totally rebuilt roots, like it, whatever, just totally had to rebuild roots. Different.
yeah that's wild. But yeah, basically these plants that are bred in living soil or these cuts that come from living soil, they're going to tap into their epigenetic state uh, a lot faster, a lot easier once they're in these living systems. And so like that's the ability for them to change with their environment. It's like these biotic stressors that we were talking about earlier, having an influence on the terpene and cannabinoid production. But so like I take I've taken clones from synthetic grows and they'll have like 3 or 5 fingers on their leaves, you know, maybe 7 sometimes. But like once they're into in the living soil for a couple cycles, then they'll all have like 7 leaves, or sometimes they'll start to have like 9 leaves again, and start to like express traits that like you only usually see in seeds. And so um, I don't know. There's something to be said about.
That's an interesting observation, because I've noticed the same thing even from my own cuts, like mixing. So I have, I guess, two different gardens that I'm in, and one I've had longer. The other one I started, and I made a whole new batch of soil for that out there, and it was different than what I was using. And basically what I noticed is my own cuts, even in that different environment, in that different soil, after about the third or fourth cycle, it was like, what? Who are you, girl? You know what I mean? They just almost like turned on, dude. It's weird to explain, but it's like they connected or something. Like, I don't know how else you'd say it, but they just like got it, and they're just expressed in such a beautiful way. It's crazy to explain, but it's different.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Just letting them express themselves fully is just truly what it's all about. Providing the soil with everything that it needs, and just letting it take care of itself. Like, it's a magical thing for sure.
Well, and I think it just kind of opens up your mind a little bit more into the idea too of, like, we always focus on, like, well, I gotta know what nutrients are in my soil mix. Like, I gotta do this soil test and these things, which is great. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Should all be in balance, but that's not the full story. Like, it's not just a matter of having everything there. It has to be cycled and become available, and not just at one point in time be water soluble. You want that cycling constantly happening. So it's like having a city fully working with all the different facets of a city: a plumber, electrician, an accountant, a gas, whatever. It's got the whole functioning thing, so everything can do what it needs to. It's like, you take away one of those things, how long does that city function without plumbers? You know what I mean?
For real.
Get shitty real fast, wouldn't it? Like,
absolutely, man. Get shitty real fast. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. And I don't know how you're doing on time. We didn't really talk about going.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at the time.
I can see you're getting a little tired too. So it's like, I mean, if you want, man, we can kind of end her here, and
shit, I'm trying to think. Probably got some other cool shit to say that I'm gonna regret not saying. But I don't know. You got any last questions for me?
I did too, man. They're kind of drawn away from me here, but
it's all good, man. I think we had a good talk.
Do another one if you think of something too.
So, yeah. Fuck yeah. I'm new to this, talking to people about this. I just had like my first like presentation at the Gathering of the Heads, and I don't know, I really liked teaching, but I realized that, like, I just get on these tangents and whatnot, and I'd like to kind of refine my my talking points, and I think it'd be more beneficial for some of these listeners. But I definitely want to do more stuff like this in the future for sure. I have some cool stuff to share.
How did that go at the Gathering of the Heads?
Oh, it was great, man. It was such a catalyst for a bunch of cool shit that's about to happen. I got to meet a bunch of people that I've been talking to online, and got to see a bunch of old friends that I met at these types of gatherings throughout the years. And I don't know, Michigan has some really, really cool natural farming community, and a lot of cool stuff happens when we physically get together and sesh and share what we know. But something that's coming out of this is I'm starting a compost cup. I know Ventura County had one, and Leighton Morrison was involved in all that, but I really like the idea of just getting like a soil nerd get together. And so, like, Wormies and Organic Alexa and Mike Freund from Ohana Farms, we're all working together to put together like this compost gathering. I think it's going to be September 18th this year, but basically it's just going to be like a gathering, educational and fun for this year. But next year we want to get like some framework for like an actual competition where we'll judge people's composts on a couple of different factors or whatnot, and just have some really cool shit nerd out. And they're both like Soil Food Web certified, and so we're starting to team up with people with labs and experience and stuff to make this type of stuff happen. But like, I would absolutely love to get together with all these other like-minded people that are excited about soil health, and like that's what the world needs right now, man. Like, honest to God, we are running out of time, and this regenerative agriculture is the cure to so many of our problems. Like, full-heartedly, I've devoted my life to the soil, and I'm fucking stoked about it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We can see it on your face that you get excited. It's a topic. I know it's interesting, man. It just draws you in. It's like it goes to so many different things. So, I mean, Ego, the normal host of the show, has kind of gotten. I don't know. He always says I forced it on him, but I always say it was an invitation. He got invited, and he took the invitation. But I brought him those earth boxes, and you know, what I mean, ever since he's been like, man, I can't believe the growth out of that. It's crazy. So he's working on shifting over too, you know. So he's got
Oh
garden already shifted to a soil, and so it's pretty interesting. It just draws you in. It literally does. It's hard to
yeah,
explain.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's so many benefits to growing this way besides, you know, making money off of selling weed. It's not all about the biggest yield, even though I can show you that we can absolutely rival yields with these methods once you tuned in. But I mean, it's the whole entire experience of like that ganja's gonna taste better. It's gonna give you a better overall experience. But then growing it in these methods is more fulfilling. And so like I've talked to a lot of synthetic growers that have been doing it for years, and they just get burnt out. You know, they're not passionate about the plants. They're not connected to the nature side of it. They're just doing it for a paycheck. But going into these rooms that are just an abundance of life, and they're polyculture instead of monoculture, you know, and like it's good to get your hands into the soil instead of like dangerous, you know. Like, a lot of these synthetic guys can't touch the nutrients that they're feeding their plants, you know, like let alone drink that shit. And, like, once you can like change over and like, I don't know, it's definitely not for everybody, but like I've seen a lot of people's quality of life just improve drastically, and like myself included. And there's so many benefits other than just growing for money and that stuff. You know?
Well, it's neat. You get excited about it, and you want to tell everybody else about it too. You know, like it's eye opening, the power of it. Like you don't realize how. Like I was saying with with the garden, I didn't realize how quickly that would have loosened up that deep into the soil. You know.
Yeah, you made an impact like fast.
Yep. You just don't realize how quickly that can happen, but it's cool.
Yeah.
I dig it, man. No, I definitely appreciate what you guys do, and it's improved my garden, no doubt. You know, every bit of it. So I'm continuing. I'll be a fan. I'll be definitely getting some more. So hopefully you guys don't sell out after this.
There's been a couple times we've been pretty damn close this season. It's been a busy season. A lot of people getting castings, so it's great to see for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing about that too. I actually absolutely hope you guys sell out. So
well, we still got a shit ton of compost for sure.
Well, I would imagine the planning on that has to get a little tricky. Like you're planning a year out. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, exactly.
Trying to figure that out, I guess, as to what you're going to need a year from now. Or do you guys just base that off basically what you can take in through material? Like
so that's more like it. Is basically taking in whatever, and then once it's laid out into those worm rows, there's not a whole lot that we need to do besides water. Like after the cover crop is sown and all that. So not a whole lot of planning as to like what we need to add or anything like that, but like physical space, and like then just keeping logs of, okay, what did we add into this one, and then like just keeping like the batches kind of separate, and just taking more notes on pretty much every little aspect about it, just to learn everything that we can, you know, to master it. But it's just been getting better and better each and every batch, and we're always saying that like each row is like, damn, this is the best row we've ever done. And like, that's how it should always be, you know. And like,
I like that.
it's good shit.
That is cool. And you're basing that, you set off the actual microscope too, right? Like you're what you consider the better than before. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. The scope is definitely a big part of it, but also just physical looks, smell, what you can, the macroorganisms that you can see are kind of indicative of the microorganisms that you can't, you know. But the scope is definitely a huge part of it, and then sending that to the lab. We've been working with Earth Fort Labs. I think they're out in Oregon. They're super highly acclaimed for microbiology. And they said that we have our compost is in the top 10% of good compost that they've ever seen. So like that's like good compost that they've ever seen, not just any, like not just vermicompost. Like yeah, so
Get on, man.
that was a good compliment for sure. We really like that. And then just met Organic Alexa, like I said. She's up in like Traverse City, Soil Food Web certified, and she just took a sample at the organic or the Gathering of the Heads. She got a sample from us, and she did some like microscopy work. And I just did a couple posts about that. Those were videos that she had captured on her scope. But so yeah, it's really cool teaming with these really smart people and groups. I have a microscope as well, and we check. But honestly, I have so much stuff on my plate. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate between these different types of nematodes and whatnot. You know, you could see there's diversity rocking in there, but like there's a certain amount of time that it actually takes to fully grasp what's going on. And so like when you can team with people that have that capacity, it's awesome. There's so much that happens when you team up with like-minded people. So like that's why these gatherings are so important, and just making this physical community, you know. And Instagram is amazing. It links all of us, but like getting together physically is huge for sure.
Yeah, no, I actually got to experience that at the regenerative conference for the first time, and it kind of, yeah, it's an awesome feeling, man. Like everybody's so positive, and just
Yeah,
the community sharing kind of attitude that's there. Like nobody really had a me attitude at all. You know, what I mean, it was all about trying to help, and you know, it's cool.
absolutely, man. You don't find anything like proprietary, no secrets in this community. Like we're all trying to help each other and help the world and grow better ganja and help more people not be reliant on chemical fertilizers and the system at general. You know, like you can do some really cool shit. Just you and the land.
Yeah. So what would you say is your biggest, I guess, leap forward in the composting process? What step was that for you, or Wormies, or was there like a big kind of aha, let's try this, and that was the big.
Yeah, a couple come to mind, but one like the moisture content. When I first started, we weren't getting the piles quite moist enough. I mean, they're still definitely not dry by any means, but like once I realized that we were like farming microbes more than we were farming worms, you know, like we needed to create the conditions for the microbes because like a lot of people don't think about this, but like the worms aren't actually eating the food scraps, but they're eating the microbes that are eating the food scraps, you know. And so if you can create the conditions for the bacteria to thrive in, then your worms are going to thrive. And so like that includes like having the right moisture, the perfect moisture content. And so like when you think about bacteria and how small they are, they can't get around very far at all, you know. And so um, if you were to give them moisture, like a biofilm to kind of like propel themselves along, and then they can move a lot farther in their lifetime. They can set up colonies and stuff and get a lot more done. And so that was a huge eye opener, is like making the distinction, like I'm farming microbes more than I'm farming worms. And so like creating the conditions, like, and just all of this is just like trying to get the point of view of the microbes or the plants or the fungi, you know, like observing nature and trying to like biomimic nature as much as possible, and like taking their point of view into consideration. And like I know a lot of that's personifying or whatnot, but like that's what's kind of cool. A lot of this, like, it helps to use your imagination and get like personal with some of these microbes. It helps for sure.
No, I like that, man. That's a huge tip right there, actually. Because a lot of times we're just thinking of turning it into something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we got to get this broken down. You know, let's
Yeah,
get it
you
broken
got to
down.
think what they want, and like the fungi, like the inoculation points and all that stuff. Um, just thinking about what they need to thrive.
Yeah, that's cool. You said so. If I wanted to get a microscope analysis done, who did you say that was in Michigan?
Her name on Instagram is organic.alexa. Organic period Alexa.
Okay. I'm gonna have to check that out too. So that'll be
For
interesting.
sure.
I mean, I actually have talked with Scott Skames from Progressive Soil. He's
Yeah.
food web certified as well. So he actually
Yep.
was on the show and did you know, a presentation basically on what consulting work he's done and seen with that. So it's kind of put that bug in my head too, as far as yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of it, like you just nailed too, is moisture content, and you're trying to propagate that biology, and those were like big aha moments for me, even in the soil. It's like, you know, that compaction issue that I ran into right away. I talked a little bit
Yep.
about. Well, that's not the right environment for them. They're not gonna thrive there. You know, you got to build the right structure. They got to be able to breathe. They got to. So yeah, those are,
Oh,
yeah. It's, I know, and you hear people. I remember going too, like when you start into it, you hear people say those things. You know what I mean? And then you're like, compaction. You hear it said, and until you really see it, all of a sudden it's like, you know, when you see it, the light bulb goes off, and you're like,
yeah.
that's what that freaking meant. What they were talking about, and
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
get it.
for
You
sure.
know?
That's what's so beneficial about like just being observant in your garden, but to like going out into nature and just observing nature, because like you'll see these examples and like you'll make these connections, and things just make a whole lot more sense, and then you could take that information back to your garden. And like I don't know, like these plants have been evolving with these microbes for eons, man, and like it's insane to try to separate the plants from the microbes. And like when we try to grow these plants in these sterile environments, that's where we run into all these problems.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
always making similarities between like the soil and human health and whatnot. And so like you have, like I said, the biology, the minerals, and the physical like aeration component. And so like in humans, we already talked about inoculating ourselves. So like our gut biomes are like, I don't know how into this we want to get preachy here, but we've been destroying our soils and just destroying biodiversity like crazy, and so our soils are lacking the diversity needed for these plants to be rich in minerals, and so most of the food on our shelves is like lack of nutrients. It doesn't have the minerals in it that we need to sustain ourselves, and so we end up being nutrient deprived, and uh, we don't have the minerals in us, but also we don't have the biology from the plants, and so like we don't have the biology necessary to take any of the nutrients that are in the plants and make them available to us, and so like the more microbes that are in the soil, like the more bacteria and the more fungi, the more nutrients are going to be available to the plants. And then, like the same thing in us, the more bacteria and fungi that we inoculate ourselves with and we eat, the more nutrients we're going to get out of our food and make them available to us. And then, so I guess the biology and the mineral aspect, but then like aeration is so damn important, and like getting outside and breathing deep and getting moving and like getting some exercise. And I like the analogy of like the compost tea, and just like blasting as much oxygen in there as possible and preventing that stagnation. Because the stagnation is where the anaerobes thrive. That's where disease is. And so like when we sit still all the time and we live a sedentary life, and we go stagnant, that's where a lot of this disease occurs. And so like it is so important to exercise and breathe deep, man, and like just get the oxygen flowing. And I don't know, there's some cool shit. Really cool shit.
Yeah, no, I like stagnant. I guess I never thought of it like that either, like relating that portion of it. So it's, yeah, I mean, getting moving, and it's been an eye-opening conversation so far, man. I've been really enjoying this. So
hell yeah, we gotta hang out, man. It's crazy that you're in Jenison.
Yeah, I'm not far from you, so or whatever. So I'd love to come out and check out the farm too, or whatever. It's cool.
Absolutely, man. Make it happen.
But no, I've been a big fan of it. Definitely glad to have the opportunity to have you guys on and be a little platform for you to preach from, you know. So.
I really appreciate it, man.
One other thing that did pop in my mind, you guys, I noticed a picture on Wormies. Actually, do you spray compost tea for like yard care, or is that something?
Yeah, man. Well, we've been super busy, but this is something that we want to focus some more time on for sure. Is this all natural lawn care service, and so like we'll offer a compost tea, and we've done a couple already this year. But I think it's like $75. We'll come spray for like up to an hour. We'll cover your whole entire property, spray all your trees, your garden, everything with this biocomplete compost, and really provide the biology that everything needs to. One, I mean, it's like a physical, like you're populating, you're inoculating the surface of everything with these good guys, these good microbes that will, it's like an army to fight off potential pathogens, you know. So like there's absolutely no room for powdery mildew or botrytis to move in, because you got a whole colony of trichoderma and bacillus and everything like on there, and enough good guys to totally outweigh any potential bad guys. So it's really powerful spraying that compost tea gun, and like I feel like I'm fighting off the neighbors that are spraying Roundup, you know, like it's truly powering, like just spraying good microbes.
What I loved about that idea is the fact that there's so many people that are spraying Roundup or spraying fertilizers onto their yard, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know.
Insane, dude.
So you're seeing a similar effect with even the pesticide or herbicide treatments. It'll knock down kind of weeds and fertilize the yards. Is that kind of the purpose, or you're just trying to inoculate straight up?
Yeah, so a lot of that comes with time and everything, but it's just crazy that people think that the Roundup is working and then they're reusing it year after year, you know, and like nature's always trying to to win, and but so yeah, spraying the compost tea is going to inoculate everything, make everything healthier, but it's also going to improve the soil long term. So like when you look at why these weeds are thriving where they are, it's like the soil succession and whatnot, and so they're in a lot of times disturbed soils, and soils that are lacking fungi. And so once you start to build that soil structure and add this diversity, and then, I mean, obviously you need something to plant instead of the weeds there. But like if you were to take out the weeds and then replace it with whatever, and then provide it the biology that whatever that you're trying to grow is going to have a much better chance of actually taking off, instead of dousing the weeds with synthetic pesticides that are going to kill the soil and not allow whatever you're trying to grow there to propagate. And it's just like a vicious cycle. You're killing the biology with the pesticide, and then you're trying to grow something in soil that has no biology, and you end up with plants that aren't healthy and they get sick, and then you need to spray more pesticide to, like, I don't know. There's no there's no natural immune system in those cycles, and you're totally reliant on the health of the plant in all aspects, and it makes no sense. That's why you see grows that are just full of deficiencies. You have different strains, and they're trying to feed them the same synthetic solution, and those different strains want different things at different times, and like you end up pissing off these plants, and they get sick, and then you're reliant on whatever means of taking care of the pests. And if you're not teaming with biology to take care of the pests, then you're doing something wrong for sure. What was I gonna say? So like pest pressure, one, like doing like your IPM spray to like actually tackle the pest problem is huge. Especially like if you're in veg, you don't want to be spraying anything in flower. But such a huge part of IPM is like adding beneficial stuff to get your plants immune system up, instead of just trying to kill like your pest. You got to be making sure that you're making your plant healthier. And so something that kind of does both of those is well, maybe not both, maybe it's not killing the pest, but using the castings and insect frass and trichoderma. Those are the three things that will induce SAR, systemic acquired resistance, in your plant, and so they'll naturally boost up their immune system and be able to fight off these pests a lot easier. And so what's cool about the castings and insect frass is they both contain chitin in it, and so like that's from like the exoskeleton, the cells of the cell walls of insects. And so that's why they're on the castings too. But so when you put it on the plants, they think that they have an infestation of bugs on them, because the chitin is in the exoskeleton and the poop of these insects. And so chitin gets on the plant produces an enzyme called chitinase that will dissolve the chitin, and that is what like triggers this systemic acquired resistance. And so it's just like giving your plant like a steroid shot. And so I've had really good results with, I had thrips, and I used the Jadam wetting agent that we talked about earlier, that surfactant, and that physically like choked them out. But then too, I sprinkled, I top dressed castings and bokashi, but then also did like a tea and foliar sprayed that tea. And this is all during veg, and the trips went away, man. Like, knock on wood, but it's insane. The plants are healthier than ever, and I've had really good results with just sprinkling the insect frass like on these lower leaves. And so just physically getting that frass like on the leaf itself will really trick them into thinking that there's bugs all over them, and they'll really ramp things up. And cool little ways to biohack or whatnot.
Yeah. Scott was actually mentioning how that shit, I lost it there. Oh, the thrips is actually, he was kind of relating that as an indicator of not having enough nutrient cycling. So like that was kind of one of the things I picked up from his notes, was like when you would see signs of thrips, they do the soil quantifications. These were the parameters they were kind of seeing, is that it was low in nutrient cyclers. So that was kind of how they established that thought process. But it was an interesting, different take on it, as far as like, instead of trying to combat it with war, like take away their, you know what I mean, take away what they're after basically, and make it
Totally
protect itself, you know.
Yeah. No, it's usually a sign of deficiency, or like non-optimal conditions if you have any pest pressure. You know, like once these plants are in these systems and you have them tuned in, you know, pest pressure should seriously be diminished, and then any pests, you know, they're not going to be out of control because there's enough beneficial stuff to keep them in balance. And balance is the name of the game. Like a healthy garden should maybe have a couple pests in it, especially outdoors. Like you should not have a clean garden, you know, free of pests. Like there should be a couple pests to have the beneficials in there. It's all a balance, you know. Yeah.
No, I get you, man. It is. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I was just what came to mind as far as a balance goes. There's somebody was just telling me about a tree in the rainforest that biologists were studying, and there was like 700 different species of beetles, all serving different functions in different places on this tree. And it was a big tree, whatever kind of tree it was, but you know, it just blew my mind, man. Like 700 different beetle species, not
Man,
even all the other insects, just the freaking beetles. You know, like it's crazy, and they're all doing something different. You know, it's like they all kind of serve a different role or a different process of that.
Yeah, dude, that is such a cool lens to have on life. Like, I literally go out into nature and like, absolutely nothing is boring now. Like, everything has meaning. Everything is fucking fascinating. Like, you could look at any part of the tree and find life on it and find, you know, and function. Like, this shit's incredible. Like,
that's what draws you in, though. It's like watching yeah, I mean, like a fish aquarium or something. Just the movement of all the stuff kind of draws you in. It's like catches your eye. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got, dude. I'm kind of running out of questions for you, and we'll definitely be talking more, and hopefully, yeah, we'll get to hang out at one of the events or something for sure.
Okay, dude. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I don't know if you want to shout out. I know, yeah, thanks to guys in the chat. We got some moderators helping, and they've been posting stuff. But I don't know if you want to shout out any of your, you know, contact info or any of that.
Yeah, for sure. Just real quick, I'd really like to thank Luis, the owner of Wormies, for this whole entire opportunity. Like, shit, man, I graduated college, and like seriously, like the next week, I went on Instagram and got a catered ad for Wormies. So like, shout out to artificial intelligence as well for stalking me and realizing that I was into worms and all that stuff. But I got a catered ad to Wormies and saw that saw what he was doing, and I don't know, the rest is history. So he's given me a really cool outlet to do some cool shit. So thank you, Luis. But yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm Jet House Gardens. I'm at Beer City Bokashi, and then Wormies is at Wormies GR. Stay in tune. We're going to be putting out some details for this compost cup coming up soon. I'm about to make a new Instagram and get some shit out there for sure. So, ton of new stuff in the works. Obviously, the soil blends. Most people have their soils already set for the season. So now we're focused on these different amendments and like tea blends, focusing on some like prepackaged like compost extract mixes and compost tea mixes. A lot of stuff with the bokashi. Starting to offer Wormies plant-based amino acids. So that's another cool water-soluble product that you can just quick mix up and spray on your leaves without having to brew a tea or anything like that. It's nice and easy. Another trick for the arsenal, another tool for the toolbox or whatnot. I don't know. Just stay tuned. We're doing some cool shit all the time for sure.
Oh yeah, man! I didn't know you did the plant-based amino acids either. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool product, no doubt.
Yes, sir. Awesome. I'll have to check some of that out.
Yeah, offering cover crop seed as well, all organic and inoculated with nitrogen fixing bacteria. So that's something that you don't see a lot of the times in these mixes is like organic seeds. And we talked about the benefits of having organic seed stock and all the endophytes that are encoded on the seeds. And I don't know, basically you can buy this one bag of seed and grow it out, let that go to seed, and then you have enough cover crops for a long fucking time for a lot, you know. It's like there's so much benefit in growing for seed and collecting seed. Like highly recommend that. Especially if you got good soil, like that seed is very valuable.
That's cool too, man. I didn't really realize you guys were getting into the cover crop stuff either. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't been on the website in a while.
Our website's lit. Like I said, dude, we're fucking busy and we don't have enough time to stay on top of the website and everything, but we're working on it. And then we're moving soon too. Right now we've been on like a half an acre for the past 3 years, and we're about to get 13 acres. So this is like exciting stuff, you know.
Yeah.
We're gonna be growing our own inputs for some dynamic composting. And then we'll separate like the food scrap pickup. So like we'll have like a true organics program, and then like the food scrap pickup and all that stuff, and maybe a couple different products in the long run. But yeah, we're scaling, and it's exciting for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember seeing that post that you had to find a new place. I guess not seeing it posted again, I assumed that it was all settled, but I never really figured out that, yeah, maybe you expanded. So that's cool.
Yeah, things have been up in the air for a while, so it's been a little bit stressful, but I think everything's coming along for sure.
Yeah, that's dope, man. I'm excited for you guys in the future. I think it's cool, the stuff the creativity to it, you know what I mean? To not just say, hey, we got a product and it's done, and let's just do it that way every time, and just the thought of wanting to make it better every time. That's cool.
Always inoculating it, always brewing something up, always fermenting something, and there's just an abundance of life there. It's fucking sweet.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. So cool. I'm gonna let you hop out, and I'll close out the episode, and I'll probably send you a link or whatever if you probably want to check it. Read the chat. Hopefully, man. There's cool people in chat. They're saying a lot of nice stuff. So.
Oh, awesome, man. All right. Peace out. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thanks, Tim. Awesome, guys. That was this month's organic takeover, and awesome dude, awesome people over there, Lewis at Wormies too. They're doing great things. I hope if you guys are in Michigan, you check them out. Definitely a strong company doing what we're looking for as far as in the whole living soil realm. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll probably fire up the wormhole in a little while, and we can talk about it a little more. But yeah, tell that, man. I appreciate everybody hanging out and taking the time to listen in and typing in chat. You guys are great, man. It's definitely fun having all you guys as friends, and knowing that I got friends around the world, and it's a cool feeling, you know. So appreciate you guys, and peace and love always.